There are places on this planet that shouldn't exist, cities carved before memory, stones too perfect for their time, and statues buried for reasons no one remembers. From the deserts of Sudan to the flooded docks of the Indus, they tell a story written in silence, of builders who worked not for empire, but for eternity. Each ruin holds the same question: how much did they truly know? These aren't legends, they're discoveries, measured, unearthed, and real, and when you look close enough, you begin to feel it. That strange connection between their world and ours, a reminder that even in deep time, humanity was already reaching for the impossible. The Tarkan dress, Egypt's oldest garment. In the desert sands of Egypt, where tombs lie silent beneath layers of dust and time, one discovery stands apart from all the gold, stone, and monuments that usually define the ancient world. It is not a statue, nor a tool, but a piece of clothing, a linen dress, woven and stitched by human hands more than 5,000 years ago. Known as the Tarkan dress, it is one of the oldest garments ever found, a rare survival from an age when the first kings of Egypt were just beginning to shape their civilization. Its existence brings a touch of humanity to a time otherwise known for its monuments, reminding us that before the pyramids, there were people who spun thread, cut fabric, and created beauty meant to be worn. The Tarkan dress was discovered in 1913 during excavations at the ancient cemetery of Tarkan, a burial site on the edge of the Nile Valley. The excavation team led by Flinders Petrie unearthed thousands of artifacts, many wrapped in linen. Among them was a bundle of fabric so darkened and fragile that it appeared to be nothing more than rags. It was carefully packed away and stored, unrecognized for decades. Only later did conservators unfold it and realize what it was: a complete, tailored linen tunic with pleated sleeves and fine stitching. Radiocarbon dating confirmed it was over 5,000 years old, belonging to the earliest era of Egyptian history. The linen is of exceptional quality. Its weave is tight and uniform, with thread so fine that it rivals the precision of later dynastic textiles. The dress was cut to fit the human form with surprising sophistication, a V-shaped neckline, tailored seams, and small pleats along the shoulders for flexibility and design. Even after millennia, the craftsmanship is unmistakable. The creator of this garment was not an amateur. They understood how to shape fabric, how to make it move with the body, and how to balance form and comfort. The Tarkan dress is, in every sense, the product of a civilization already deeply skilled in design and technique. The people who made it lived in a world of river settlements, where the Nile's floods brought fertility and life to the surrounding land. Villages were growing into cities, trade was expanding, and new social orders were emerging. Textiles in this period were not merely functional, they represented status, wealth, and ritual importance. Fine linen was a prized material, reserved for high-ranking individuals and ceremonial use. The Tarkan dress likely belonged to a woman of standing, possibly buried in a tomb to accompany her into the afterlife. The delicacy of the linen and the precision of its cut reflect a culture that already valued beauty, identity, and craftsmanship long before monumental art appeared. What makes this garment so remarkable is its survival. Organic materials rarely endure for thousands of years. Most clothing decays within centuries, but Egypt's desert preserved what time could not. Dry sand sealed the tomb and kept air and moisture away. The fibers hardened, but the form remained intact. Pleats, seams, and even the faint traces of movement still visible in the fabric. Through it, the voice of the past feels closer, as if the person who once wore it has only just stepped away. For archaeologists, the Tarkan dress offers more than an artifact. It provides a window into early human behavior. It proves that by 3000 BCE, Egyptian society already possessed organized textile workshops, skilled laborers, and an aesthetic sensibility that linked everyday life with artistry. The weaving of flax into linen required not only tools and technique, but also agriculture and trade networks capable of supporting specialized production. The existence of such a refined garment at such an early stage of civilization marks a turning point in human ingenuity, when practicality met art. Each thread of the Tarkan dress carries evidence of its maker's world. The fibers were drawn from flax grown along the riverbanks, spun by hand, and woven on looms powered by simple human motion. The work was slow and deliberate. Every seam stitched by someone who understood that clothing was more than protection, it was expression. The fine pleats and symmetrical cut reveal not just a technical achievement, but a human story. Someone measured, someone planned, and someone created this dress to fit a real body, to move through a real day in an ancient life. The dress also reshaped the understanding of early Egyptian society. Before its discovery, historians believed that fine textile production developed later, during the Pyramid Age. But this garment proved that high-quality weaving and tailoring existed centuries earlier. The people who lived before the first dynasties already possessed complex skills and artistic values that would later define Egyptian civilization. In this sense, the Tarkan dress is not merely a relic, it is a beginning. the earliest surviving chapter in the story of human fashion and identity. Under magnification, the weave of the linen still shows its subtle rhythm, over and under, thread by thread, the quiet language of ancient craft. The fibers have aged, but their structure endures. The dress embodies patience, design, and the desire to create something lasting. It links the technological to the intimate. The same society that built stone tombs also made garments of comfort and grace. It connects the builders of pyramids to the weavers of linen, the engineers to the artists, the rulers to the everyday people who gave form to the world around them. The Tarkan dress survived because of circumstance, sealed in sand, forgotten, and spared the destruction that took nearly everything else from its time. But its endurance feels almost intentional, as if it was meant to outlast the centuries and remind future generations that civilization is built not only on stone and power, but on skill, creativity, and care. The dress's existence bridges the gap between the monumental and the personal, showing that even in humanity's earliest days, people sought beauty in the details of life. It remains one of the most extraordinary textile discoveries in the history of archaeology, a piece of clothing that carries within it the memory of a civilization's dawn, woven thread by thread in the age before history was written. Its presence speaks quietly but clearly across time, a reminder that art, identity, and craftsmanship have always been part of what it means to be human. The Mehrgar dentist skull. In the dry plains of Balochistan, near the Bolan Pass of Pakistan, archaeologists uncovered one of the earliest farming settlements in human history, the site of Mehrgar. It was here, beneath layers of mud brick houses and ancient graves, that researchers found a human skull that quietly rewrote the history of medicine. In its teeth were tiny deliberate holes, each one carefully drilled with a stone tool. The discovery revealed that more than 7,000 years before textbooks began to describe dentistry, people in Mehrgar had already learned to treat dental problems through surgery. The skull came from a burial belonging to the Neolithic period, around 5500 BCE. Mehrgar itself was one of the first communities to practice agriculture on the Indian subcontinent. Its people domesticated animals, cultivated wheat and barley, and produced pottery and ornaments, but the drilled teeth in this skull showed something far more advanced, evidence of early medical understanding, skill, and courage. For the first time it became clear that these early farmers were not only building houses and growing crops, but also caring for one another's health in ways no one expected from such an ancient society. The discovery began when a team examining human remains from the site noticed small circular holes on several teeth. At first they seemed like damage caused by wear or decay. But under microscopic study, the holes revealed smooth edges and symmetrical forms, signs of controlled drilling. Further analysis confirmed that the marks were made intentionally using fine, pointed flint tools, likely spun by hand or with a simple bow drill. The precision and placement suggested that the purpose was to remove decayed tissue or relieve pain, an act of early dentistry. In total, researchers found evidence of dental drilling in several individuals from Mehrgar. The holes ranged from 1 to 3 millimeters in diameter, often penetrating into cavities or along the edge of molars. In some cases, the surrounding bone showed signs of healing, meaning that the patient survived the procedure and continued to live afterward. This detail alone proved that these were not ritual actions or accidental damage. They were deliberate treatments carried out with care. The tools used in the process were most likely the same types of flint drills used for bead making. Mehrgar is known for its bead workshops, where artisans shaped and perforated tiny stones and shells with incredible precision. The same technique that allowed them to craft ornaments was adapted for medical use. This crossover between craft and care reveals something deeply human, the ability to use existing knowledge to solve new problems. The people of Mehrgar did not separate technology from healing, they applied skill wherever it could help. Performing such a procedure required both knowledge and bravery. Flint drills were sharp, but the process must have been painful. There were no anesthetics, and yet the patient endured. This endurance speaks to a trust in the healer and a shared understanding of pain and recovery. In a world without written language, this was medicine learned through experience, observation, trial, and the quiet wisdom of survival. The skull also provides insight into daily life in Mehrgar. The people here ate a diet of coarse grains, leading to heavy wear on their teeth. Food grit and poor oral hygiene caused infections and cavities. It is likely that dental pain was a common issue, and that those skilled with tools, perhaps bead makers or healers, attempted to alleviate it. Over time, their techniques became refined enough to leave the unmistakable marks of drilling visible thousands of years later. This discovery changed the understanding of early medicine. Before it, evidence of surgical knowledge from this period was limited mostly to trepanation, the practice of drilling holes in the skull to treat head injuries or spiritual conditions. The Mehrgar skull extended this concept to dentistry, showing that the same ingenuity used to treat the head was applied to the mouth. It represents one of the earliest known cases of specialized surgery in human history. The broader context of Mehrgar adds depth to the story. This was not a primitive village, but a thriving settlement with organized agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. Houses were built from mud brick, granaries stored food, and people were buried with care and offerings. The community understood both practicality and ritual, living in a balanced relationship with their environment. The act of dental drilling fits within this world. It was part of a broader system of problem-solving that defined early human settlements. Chemical analysis of the drilled teeth showed traces consistent with friction heating, suggesting that the drills spun quickly. Experiments with reconstructed tools have shown that ancient craftsmen could achieve several hundred revolutions per minute with simple bow drills, more than enough to pierce enamel. This finding emphasizes the precision and efficiency of early artisans. They worked with the hardest material in the human body, using only stone tools, guided by nothing but skill and instinct. What makes the Mehrgar dentist's skull so powerful is its humanity. It reminds us that pain, healing, and compassion are not modern inventions. Long before cities and empires, people looked after one another with the tools they had. Someone cared enough to attempt a cure. Someone trusted enough to endure the pain. The traces of those moments remain etched into the fossilized teeth, tiny circles that tell a story of courage and care across 7 millennia. The skull's discovery also connects archaeology and medicine in a unique way. It shows that innovation often begins not with wealth or power, but with necessity. When faced with suffering, people learned, adapted, and experimented. In the dust of an ancient graveyard, those first attempts at healing left a physical record more enduring than any monument. The Mehrgar skull stands as proof that science, craftsmanship, and empathy have deep roots. It links the birth of agriculture to the birth of medicine, showing that as humans learn to control the land, they also learn to care for each other's bodies. Each drilled tooth is a reminder that progress began not in laboratories, but in small villages, with stone tools, steady hands, and the will to help another human being live without pain. The skull's drilled molars still bear the signs of effort and patience, a mark of innovation at the dawn of civilization. They are among the oldest physical traces of medical practice ever found, created long before writing, before history, and before science as we know it. Yet the act they represent, the drive to heal, is timeless. In those drilled teeth, the story of humanity's first dentist still survives. The bronze statue of Besetkot. In the northern hills of ancient Mesopotamia, near the village of Besetkot in Iraq, archaeologists uncovered a fragment of bronze that changed the understanding of early metalworking. It was the torso of a statue, broken at the knees, its surface smooth and naturalistic, cast with skill centuries ahead of its time. The artifact became known as the Besetkot statue, a 4,000-year-old bronze sculpture from the Akkadian period, one of the earliest examples of true lifelike metal casting in human history. Its craftsmanship was so advanced that for decades specialists debated how such technology could have existed so early in civilization's timeline. The statue was found by accident in 1975, during road construction near the town of Besetkot in northern Iraq. Workers uncovered a heavy metal object buried deep in the soil, and when archaeologists arrived, they realized its importance almost immediately. The torso was solid bronze, standing on a lead-filled base used to balance the figure, a detail showing not only artistry but engineering awareness. In its surviving form, the statue depicts the lower half of a seated male figure, muscular and proportionate, modeled with remarkable anatomical accuracy. The subtle definition of the legs, the curve of the hips, and the surface polish all reveal a mastery of metalworking, rarely seen even in much later cultures. Analysis dates the statue to around 2300 BCE, during the reign of the Akkadian kings, possibly the era of Naram-Sin, grandson of Sargon of Akkad. This was a time when the world's first empire united Mesopotamia under a single ruler. The Akkadians inherited the knowledge of the Sumerians and expanded it into art, architecture, and administration. The Besetki statue is believed to have been part of a full-seated figure, perhaps representing a deity or royal personage. The level of skill involved in its creation reflects the sophistication of the Akkadian court, a civilization that understood not just how to make art, but how to cast identity and power into metal. What makes the Besetki statue extraordinary is its material and technique. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was still a relatively new innovation at the time. Most sculptures of the era were made of stone or copper hammered into shape. Casting a large figure in bronze required precise control of heat, timing, and proportion. Metallurgists had to calculate the right mixture of metals, build complex molds, and pour molten bronze at temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. The process known as lost wax casting or cire perdue involves sculpting a model in wax, covering it with clay, melting the wax out, and replacing it with liquid metal. The Besetki statue is one of the earliest known examples of this technique applied on a monumental scale. Microscopic examination of the surface revealed flow lines consistent with true casting rather than hammering or soldering. The The metal's uniformity indicates that it was poured in one continuous process, showing complete mastery over temperature and cooling. The fact that the statue remained stable after thousands of years also proves the alloy was expertly mixed, resistant to cracking or corrosion. This level of technical understanding suggests a long tradition of experimentation and knowledge sharing among Mesopotamian metalworkers, an early form of applied science driven by both utility and artistry. The artistic quality of the statue matches its technical brilliance. The modeling of the muscles, the natural pose, and the proportion of the limbs demonstrate observation and realism. The sculptor was not merely copying form but interpreting the human body with sensitivity and precision. Even though the upper half of the statue is missing, the surviving section conveys weight, balance, and presence. It feels alive, as if the figure could shift slightly in its seat at any moment. This sense of vitality, rare in ancient art, reflects the emergence of individuality in Akkadian sculpture, a move away from rigid symbolism toward naturalism. The base of the statue carries a cuneiform inscription that connects it directly to the political history of the Akkadian Empire. The text celebrates the deification of Naram-Sin, who declared himself a god after his victories in battle. It records the placement of his statue in a temple, likely as a cult image. This link between art, divinity, and power was central to Mesopotamian ideology. The Basetki statue, then, was not merely decorative, it was a symbol of divine kingship, a bridge between human rule and cosmic order. Through bronze, the Akkadians sought permanence, to preserve authority and reverence in a form that could outlast flesh and stone alike. The realism of the Basetki statue marks a turning point in art history. Earlier Mesopotamian figures tended toward stylization, broad shoulders, wide eyes, and formal poses. The Akkadian artists, however, introduced a new language of form that emphasized motion, anatomy, and psychological depth. They sought to capture what was seen, not just what was meant. The Basetki statue belongs to this artistic revolution, alongside masterpieces like the bronze head of an Akkadian ruler found at Nineveh. Both reflect a moment when artists looked closer at the human form and infused it with energy and realism. The discovery also offers insight into ancient metal economies. Producing bronze required importing tin from distant lands, possibly from the Iranian plateau or Central Asia. This trade implies a vast network connecting regions through resource exchange. Bronze was valuable, and large sculptures were rare because of their cost. The creation of the Basetki statue would have required not only technical skill but significant state resources, miners, smelters, artisans, and administrators working together. In that sense, the statue is both an artwork and a monument to the organization of an empire. The statue's survival was accidental. It appears to have been buried deliberately, perhaps during conflict or as an offering. Akkad itself eventually fell to internal strife and invasion, and the empire disappeared into history. Yet this bronze figure endured beneath the earth, untouched for 4 millennia. Its rediscovery opened a window into the technological and cultural achievements of a people who once ruled the heart of Mesopotamia. Through it, the sophistication of early metallurgy, art, and imperial ideology came sharply into focus. The Basetki statue stands as evidence that the pursuit of perfection in art began much earlier than once thought. It captures a civilization that was already experimenting with lifelike form, metal science, and the power of imagery to express rule and divinity. The skill that shaped it laid the foundation for artistic traditions that would continue through Babylon, Assyria, and beyond. It is a rare moment when art, technology, and belief align so perfectly. A human figure cast not only in metal but in memory, enduring across ages as a reflection of how deeply ancient people understood both beauty and permanence. The Iron Lion of Quanzhou. In the flat plains of northern China, where winter winds move across endless stretches of farmland, stands one of the most extraordinary metal sculptures ever made. A colossal lion, cast entirely in iron, weighing over 40 tons, has endured there for more than 1,000 years. Known as the Iron Lion of Quanzhou, it was created in 953 AD, during the later Zhou dynasty. At first glance, it appears simply as a monument to strength and protection, but the closer it is studied, the more impossible it seems. The technology needed to cast a single piece of iron of that size should not have existed in that time, yet somehow it did. The Iron Lion is immense. It stands more than 5 meters tall, with its head raised and its jaws open, frozen in a posture of power. The body's surface shows detailed craftsmanship, muscles shaped beneath layers of armor-like texture, claws extending from massive paws, and a mane that curls in intricate patterns of molten flow. The lion's expression carries a blend of majesty and vigilance, as if guarding the land around it. Beneath its imposing presence lies a mystery that has intrigued metallurgists and historians for generations. How was it made, and why was it made at all? The 10th century was a time of fragmentation in China, known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period. Despite political upheaval, art and engineering flourished. Iron production, used primarily for weapons, tools, and construction, had reached an advanced stage, but casting iron in such a massive single form was far beyond ordinary craftsmanship. The Iron Lion was not made from assembled pieces, it was poured as one complete casting, a feat that would challenge even modern foundries. To achieve this, ancient metalworkers had to control heat, flow, and timing on a scale nearly unimaginable. Iron casting requires precise temperature management. The metal must be heated to around 1200 degrees Celsius and poured quickly before it cools and solidifies. For a 40-ton statue, this meant melting and controlling an enormous volume of metal at once, using massive furnaces, complex molds, and a system of channels to ensure even filling. The existence of the Iron Lion implies that its creators mastered large-scale metallurgical coordination centuries ahead of other known technologies. It reveals an industrial capability that would not be matched in the West until much later. Historical records describe the statue as a guardian spirit, placed to protect the region from floods and evil forces. Quanzhou, located near the Bohai Sea, suffered frequent disasters caused by river changes and storms. The lion's placement near waterways may have been symbolic, a talisman of strength meant to hold nature's chaos at bay. In Chinese tradition, lions were not native animals but mythological protectors, introduced through Buddhist influence from India centuries earlier. They symbolized power, protection, and balance. The Iron Lion embodied all of this, uniting engineering, religion, and art in a single monumental act of devotion. The composition of the statue's metal adds another layer of intrigue. Analyses show that the iron used was of exceptionally high quality, with low impurity levels. The even distribution of carbon within the alloy suggests controlled smelting, which required sustained high temperatures and advanced furnaces. The statue's surface shows signs of controlled cooling, evidence that the craftsman not only understood how to melt iron, but also how to manage its solidification to prevent cracking. This understanding of metallurgy predates the industrial age by nearly a millennium. Cast iron statues of such scale are rare anywhere in the ancient world. Bronze was typically preferred for monumental works because it was easier to melt and shape. Iron, being harder and more temperamental, was used mainly for weapons and tools. To choose iron for art meant embracing difficulty in exchange for endurance. The Iron Lion's makers sought permanence, a guardian that could outlast dynasties, wars, and time itself. And it has. The lion's surface bears inscriptions and stylistic features linking it to the later Zhou dynasty, under Emperor Shizong. Some historians believe the statue may have been commissioned to commemorate military victories or assert imperial authority. Others think it served a more spiritual purpose, embodying the Buddhist concept of Dharma protection. Whatever its intent, its creation required not only state resources but also immense technical coordination. Teams of foundry workers, mold makers, and metallurgists must have labored for months to design, cast, and cool the statue without it cracking under its own weight. The lion's internal structure likely contains reinforcements or hollows designed to reduce stress during cooling. Archaeological studies reveal that the casting mold was assembled in sections, then sealed and filled in a single controlled pour. Air vents were carefully placed to allow gases to escape, preventing pressure buildup that could have shattered the mold. Each phase required precise timing, as molten metal cannot wait. Once poured, there was no room for correction. Success depended entirely on preparation and instinct. Beyond its technical mastery, the Iron Lion reflects a deep cultural symbolism. In Chinese thought, lions are paired guardians often placed at entrances to temples, palaces, and bridges. They represent vigilance and cosmic balance, yin and yang in protective form. The Quanzhou lion's massive size amplifies that meaning, turning the concept into a physical reality. It does not simply decorate the landscape, it defines it. The power it projects comes not from ferocity, but from permanence, a silent strength that endures the erosion of centuries. The surrounding region, rich in salt and trade routes, was historically strategic. The presence of such a monumental sculpture could also have served as a political statement, a symbol of control, civilization, and technological supremacy. The Iron Lion, immovable and enduring, may have been a message of stability during a time when empires rose and fell in rapid succession. Its creation, therefore, was both practical and ideological, an embodiment of endurance in an unstable world. The statue's details, even in corrosion, still hold traces of the original artistry. The mane's patterning, the layered armor texture, and the curled tail all suggest that the sculptors were familiar with both animal anatomy and symbolic design. The lion was stylized, but not abstract. It looked powerful enough to move yet balanced enough to last. The mastery lies not only in metal, but in form, a sculpture that captured the essence of strength while being forged from one of Earth's hardest materials. In its 1,000 years of existence, the Iron Lion has witnessed dynasties change, empires fall, and technology advance far beyond its own making. yet it remains unmatched in its category, the largest surviving cast-iron sculpture of the pre-industrial world. It stands as a monument to human ambition, to the idea that creation is not bound by the limits of its era. Its builders worked with what they had, achieving what should have been impossible, leaving behind a legacy of mastery that defies explanation. The Iron Lion of Kangzhou endures as a silent witness to human ingenuity, a guardian forged from earth and fire, shaped by hands that understood both art and science long before such words existed. Its weight, its form, and its endurance remind us that even in the distant past, there were those who dreamed of permanence, and somehow, against all odds, achieved it. The Sphinx of Naxos. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, in the sanctuary of Delphi, once believed to be the center of the world, a creature of marble once stood watch over pilgrims and kings. Carved around 560 BCE from a single block of stone, the Sphinx of Naxos rose more than 8 meters into the air, its wings outstretched, its gaze turned toward eternity. The sculpture was both guardian and warning, a figure of mystery placed near the oracle's sacred precinct. Even after more than 2,000 years, it remains one of the most striking creations of archaic Greece, a fusion of myth, craftsmanship, and divine symbolism. The Sphinx, half woman and half lion, was a creature of riddles. In Greek mythology, she tested travelers with questions that led to life or death. But at Delphi, the image of the Sphinx served a different purpose. It was not a destroyer, but a protector, a being positioned between humans and gods, embodying wisdom and vigilance. The people of Naxos, a wealthy island in the Aegean Sea, dedicated this colossal statue to Apollo, the god of prophecy. Its placement beside his temple proclaimed devotion, but also pride. It was a gift meant to impress, a declaration of Naxian power in the sacred heart of Greece. The Sphinx of Naxos was carved from Parian marble, a material prized for its fine grain and luminous quality. Sculptors shaped it with precision, using chisels and abrasives to achieve smooth curves and crisp edges. The creature's body combined the strength of a lion with the elegance of a woman, its wings detailed with rhythmic feathers, stretched upward in balance with the tall Ionic column that supported it. The face was serene but alert, framed by stylized curls that echoed the patterns of early Greek art. The overall effect was both graceful and intimidating, a form designed to command reverence. The statue stood atop a slender column more than 10 meters high. This height gave the Sphinx a commanding presence over the sanctuary, visible from far below. Pilgrims approaching Delphi would have seen it long before reaching the temple complex. Its elevated position symbolized transcendence, the space between earth and sky, between mortal knowledge and divine truth. It was an artistic and spiritual statement, perfectly suited to the site where the oracle spoke in riddles, and where gods were believed to reveal their will. At the time the Sphinx was erected, Greek sculpture was transitioning from rigid formality to naturalism. Earlier works like the Koroi and Korai male and female statues with fixed poses and idealized features reflected symbolic perfection rather than realism. The Sphinx of Naxos, however, showed a growing awareness of movement and anatomy. Its body turns slightly, its muscles flow beneath the marble surface, and its wings appear to lift. The sculptor captured the moment between stillness and motion, giving life to stone. This combination of stylization and vitality marks the artistry of the late Archaic period. The dedication of such a large and costly monument reveals the importance of Naxos in the 6th century BCE. The island was known for its marble quarries and skilled artisans. Its people were traders, sailors, and patrons of art. By placing their Sphinx at Delphi, the most sacred site in Greece, they ensured that their presence would be remembered among all city-states. The inscription at the base identified Naxos as the donor, securing eternal recognition in the heart of Greek religion. The gift was not merely pious, but political, a statement of influence made through artistry. The symbolism of the Sphinx itself deepened the meaning of the dedication. In Greek belief, the creature represented intelligence, mystery, and protection against evil. Its female face suggested divine insight, while its lion body represented strength. By placing such a being at Delphi, the Naxians invoked both qualities, wisdom to interpret the god's words, and power to guard his temple. The presence of the Sphinx at the site of the oracle reinforced the sanctity of prophecy and the connection between human questioning and divine response. The craftsmanship of the statue continues to reveal the technical mastery of early Greek sculptors. Carving such a large piece of marble required coordination, precision, and an understanding of the stone structure. The sculptor had to account for balance, ensuring that the weight of the wings and torso aligned perfectly with the supporting column. The surface was polished with abrasives to achieve a smooth finish that caught the sunlight. The column itself was likely painted or decorated, adding color and detail that have long since vanished. Every aspect of the monument was calculated to create harmony, a physical expression of the Greek pursuit of order and proportion. Although the Sphinx of Naxos was rooted in Greek art, its origins lie in older traditions. The idea of a hybrid guardian creature came from the east, from Mesopotamian Lamassu, Egyptian sphinxes, and Hittite lion gods. Greek artists absorbed these influences and transformed them into their own style, blending foreign symbolism with local aesthetics. The result was a distinctly Greek interpretation of an ancient idea, a creature not of fear, but of balance, intelligence, and divine presence. The Sphinx of Naxos stands as one of the earliest examples of this cultural synthesis, bridging mythologies across continents. The choice to dedicate a sphinx, rather than a human figure, also reflected Delphi's mysterious nature. The oracle's prophecies were never direct, they came in riddles and metaphors. The Sphinx, too, spoke in riddles. Her presence at the site mirrored the way truth was revealed through enigma. To approach Delphi was to step into a realm where answers were hidden within questions, where knowledge required humility. The Sphinx's gaze, fixed across the sacred valley, reminded all who entered that wisdom must be earned, not demanded. The statue endured centuries of change, the rise and fall of city-states, the coming of Rome, and the transformation of Greek religion. Earthquakes and invasions damaged the sanctuary, but fragments of the Sphinx survived. Each piece recovered from the ruins tells part of the story: the curve of a wing, the line of a paw, the calm expression carved into the marble face. These remnants speak of an age when stone was shaped not only by tools but by belief, when art served as a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The Sphinx of Naxos represents more than myth or sculpture. It embodies the essence of archaic Greece, a civilization striving to understand the world through harmony and symbolism. Its creators took an ancient image and transformed it into something uniquely their own, merging fear and beauty, power and wisdom. The result was a monument that stood watch over Delphi for centuries, a guardian of questions and a symbol of faith and knowledge itself. Even in silence, the Sphinx continues to ask its riddle, not with words but with its enduring form. It reminds us that the pursuit of truth has always required courage, curiosity, and balance. Like the pilgrims who once stood beneath its wings, we are left to wonder what answers lie hidden behind the face of stone that still watches over the sacred valley. The Grotto of Amarnath. High in the Himalayas, where clouds drift between icy peaks and the air thins with altitude, lies a cavern that has drawn pilgrims for countless generations. Known as the Grotto of Amarnath, this natural ice cave sits more than 3,800 meters above sea level, deep in the Kashmir Valley of northern India. Within its frozen heart forms a towering column of ice, a naturally occurring lingam, revered as a manifestation of Lord Shiva. Every year, as snow melts and water drips through the stone, the lingam grows again from the floor of the cave, its shape rising in silence. For thousands of years, people have climbed through cold, thin air to witness it, an eternal ritual where nature and faith meet in the stillness of the mountain. The journey to Amarnath is not an easy one. The path winds through steep passes and glacial streams, where even in summer, the air carries the bite of winter. Travelers move slowly, breathing through the cold, guided by trails that have existed since ancient times. The cave sits hidden within a narrow gorge, its entrance half concealed by rock and ice. Inside, the temperature drops sharply, and the sound of dripping water echoes against the stone walls. In the dim light, the ice column appears, clear, smooth, and luminous. It stands like a living symbol of renewal, changing form each season, yet always returning. The legend of Amarnath tells that it was here, in this very cave, that Lord Shiva revealed the secret of immortality to his consort Parvati. According to the story, he chose the remote location so that no living creature could overhear his words. As he spoke, fire, wind, and even the moon were said to have gone still. The cave became sacred, not only for the ice lingam, but for the story it carries. The divine whisper of truth shared between gods, forever preserved in the silence of ice and stone. Archaeological and historical studies trace the worship at Amarnath to many centuries before written records. The first documented reference to the cave appears in ancient Sanskrit texts, describing a shrine in the Himalayas where ice itself took the form of Shiva. Local traditions claim that shepherds once stumbled upon it when one lost goat led him to the cave's entrance. What began as a small place of reverence grew into a great pilgrimage, drawing people from across the Indian subcontinent. Geologically, the cave is part of a glacial formation shaped by thousands of years of water flow and freeze. The stalagmite-like ice lingam forms from dripping water that freezes upon contact with the cave floor. As temperature and humidity shift, the column grows and recedes in cycles, echoing the rhythm of creation and dissolution found in Hindu philosophy. The natural process mirrors the myth it represents, life forming and fading in endless repetition. Science and spirituality meet here without contradiction. Both describe a phenomenon of renewal and continuity. The scale of the lingam has long fascinated visitors. Depending on the season, it can rise to several meters in height, its shape smooth and translucent. Pilgrims see in its growth the cycles of existence, creation, preservation, and destruction, the essence of Shiva's cosmic role. Around it, smaller ice formations often appear, symbolically linked to Parvati and Ganesha. Inside the grotto, the atmosphere feels suspended, as if time itself slows to the pace of the dripping water. The faint light reflecting off the ice fills the space with a pale glow that no human hand could reproduce. The annual pilgrimage to the Amarnath Grotto, known as the Amarnath Yatra, is one of the most challenging spiritual journeys in the world. For thousands of years, pilgrims have crossed mountain passes, endured storms, and walked through freezing rivers to reach the cave. The route follows ancient paths that wind through the valleys of Palgam and Baltal, each step marked by devotion and endurance. The climb itself becomes an act of faith, a personal offering of effort and willpower to the divine. Historically, the cave has been more than a religious site. It has been a cultural symbol of continuity in the Himalayas. The devotion surrounding Amarnath transcends generations, linking empires, dynasties, and communities. Inscriptions and folk songs from the region speak of travelers carrying offerings through snow and rain. Ancient rulers supported the pilgrimage routes, ensuring safe passage for devotees. In an environment where survival itself is uncertain, the persistence of this journey reflects the deep resilience of faith. Within the cave, the natural formation of the lingam serves as a reminder of how closely early civilizations observed nature. Long before science described thermodynamics or water cycles, people recognized sacred patterns in the world around them. The mountain's ability to create and dissolve the ice pillar was understood as divine presence, a visible manifestation of creation and transformation. It connects geological process to spiritual meaning in a way that few other places on Earth can. The Amarnath Grotto also holds importance in the broader understanding of Himalayan sacred geography. Throughout these mountains, caves have served as sanctuaries, meditation sites, and symbols of rebirth. The combination of isolation, natural beauty, and danger gives them a power that transcends culture. The Amarnath Cave, with its self-forming lingam, stands as one of the purest expressions of that idea. A temple not built by human hands, but shaped by the mountain itself. Inside, every sound is softened by ice. The dripping of water marks the passing of moments. For pilgrims, entering the grotto is not merely an act of worship but a journey inward, a confrontation with silence, endurance, and humility. Each breath in the cold air carries the weight of countless others who have stood in the same spot, their footsteps frozen in time. The cave becomes a space where human effort meets nature's rhythm, and faith becomes indistinguishable from awe. Over millennia, countless generations have seen the same sight, a shaft of light glancing off ice, revealing the image of the lingam, perfectly formed. For them it is proof that divinity still moves through the natural world, that even in the hardest landscapes, creation renews itself. The legend of Shiva and Parvati may belong to mythology, but the experience of standing in that frozen cavern belongs to the senses, the chill of stone, the dim glow of ice, the echo of one's own heartbeat. The Grotto of Amarnath stands as a reminder that the sacred is not always built. Sometimes, it is revealed. The mountain, through its cycles of freezing and thawing, continues a ritual older than memory, one that requires no words, no inscription, only presence. In that quiet cave, surrounded by the immensity of the Himalayas, the story of creation and dissolution continues, written not in scripture, but in ice. The Roman sound theater of Aspendos. In the warm plains of southern Turkey, surrounded by olive groves and the slow rhythm of the Kopruchai River, rises one of the most perfectly preserved theaters of the ancient world, Aspendos. Built nearly 2,000 years ago. During the height of the Roman Empire, this stone amphitheater possesses a kind of perfection that continues to confound architects and engineers. Its design is not only grand but exact. Every curve, every stair, every stone was placed with one purpose, to shape sound. The theater of Aspendos is an architectural symphony carved into limestone. Semicircular tiers of seating ascend in precise harmony, encircling the stage like waves of frozen motion. A whisper from the center of the stage can be heard clearly, even at the highest seat, nearly 60 meters away. There are no electronic amplifiers, no modern devices, only geometry and stone, arranged with an understanding of acoustics so advanced that it feels modern in every sense except time. Built in the 2nd century CE, under the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, the theater was the creation of the local architect Zenon, son of Theodoros. According to an inscription found at the site, Zenon dedicated his work to the emperor and the gods, offering the city of Aspendos a monument that would outlast its builders. The city itself was ancient even then, originally founded by the Greeks and later absorbed into the Roman world. Its prosperity came from trade, agriculture, and culture, and the theater stood as its crowning achievement, both a civic gathering place and a testament to Roman engineering. The structure could hold an audience of up to 15,000 people. Its design follows the traditional Roman plan, a semicircular orchestra, a raised stage building called the scaenae fronts, and a vast arrangement of tiered seating known as the cavea. Yet Aspendos surpasses nearly all others in precision. The curvature of the seating, the angle of the walls, and the height of the stage were calibrated to control how sound travels. The result is so exact that a single voice from the stage can fill the entire space without strain. The secret lies in the mathematics of resonance. Roman engineers understood that sound moves as waves, reflecting off hard surfaces and decaying with distance. At Aspendos, every surface contributes to the reflection. The seating tiers are steep enough to minimize sound loss, while the stage wall, intricately decorated with columns, niches, and cornices, acts as an acoustic shell, bouncing sound back toward the audience. The orchestra's smooth stone floor amplifies the actor's voice upward, and the curvature of the cavea prevents echo overlap. The entire structure functions like a natural amplifier, created centuries before the science of acoustics was formally described. The theater's stage building is one of its most impressive features. Rising nearly as high as the seating area itself, it formed both a backdrop and an architectural frame for performances. Its facade was once adorned with marble statues, ornate carvings, and Corinthian columns. These decorations were not merely aesthetic, they contributed to the acoustics by breaking up and diffusing sound, preventing distortion. Every decorative surface served both form and function, a balance the Romans perfected. Performances at Aspendos were more than entertainment. In Roman culture, the theater was a place of civic life, where citizens gathered to hear speeches, enjoy plays, and celebrate festivals. Actors recited tragedies and comedies written in Greek and Latin, while musicians played instruments such as the aulos and the lyre. The stage would echo with poetry, laughter, and debate. In this setting, sound was more than art. It was a form of unity, binding thousands of people in shared experience. The theater's longevity owes much to its construction materials and technique. The Romans built it from local limestone blocks fitted without mortar, relying on precision cuts and compression. The seating was divided by radial stairways into wedge-shaped sections, allowing easy movement and perfect structural balance. Beneath the seats, vaulted corridors distributed weight and provided access to the upper levels. Even the staircases and entrances were engineered to direct the flow of crowds efficiently, a reflection of Rome's mastery of urban design. The city of Aspendos itself sat at the crossroads of trade routes, connecting the Mediterranean to inland Anatolia. Wealth from commerce funded public works like the theater, aqueducts, and temples. The theater became a symbol of civic pride, not just a monument to art, but to collective achievement. It reflected the Roman ideal that architecture could embody the harmony of the universe through proportion and order. What makes the Aspendos Theater unique among the hundreds built across the empire is how completely it preserves the ancient sound. Many Roman theaters survive as ruins, their acoustic integrity lost with missing walls or collapsed seating. But at Aspendos, the structure remains whole. The same stones that once amplified the voices of actors continue to carry sound with clarity. The precision is so remarkable that even the faintest syllable can travel across the entire arena without echo or distortion. The theater's position within the landscape also contributes to its effect. Built into a gentle hillside, it merges architecture with geography. The natural slope of the terrain supports the seating tiers, while the open end faces the plains and mountains beyond. The location creates an acoustic enclosure that amplifies resonance. It also connects the theater to its surroundings, an intentional Roman practice, aligning human creation with nature's form. In its time, Aspendos was more than entertainment, it was a living expression of empire. Every sound that echoed within its walls reflected the unity and order Rome sought to project. Voices carried not only words but the weight of civilization, law, art, and belief, all bound by the invisible mathematics of sound. The builders of Aspendos achieved something profound. They made stone speak. Centuries passed. Empires shifted, languages changed, and the theater fell silent for long stretches of time. Yet its structure held. Wind, rain, and silence could not erase the harmony built into its form. Even in absence, the space feels tuned, as if waiting for a voice to awaken it again. The Roman sound theater of Aspendos stands as a reminder of what human understanding can achieve when art and engineering meet. It embodies precision born of intuition, mathematics expressed through stone, and beauty shaped by the science of listening. To stand within its half-circle and speak aloud is to touch the same space where ancient voices once carried their words across time, unchanged, clear, and everlasting. The fortress of Van, high above the blue waters of Lake Van, in eastern Anatolia, a wall of stone rises from a sheer limestone ridge. Built nearly 3,000 years ago, it has watched over this landscape through storms, invasions, and the slow passage of centuries. Known as the Fortress of Van, it was once the capital stronghold of the ancient kingdom of Urartu, a mountain civilization that flourished long before classical empires took shape. Its builders carved, stacked, and fitted stone with such precision that much of the fortress still stands, an enduring symbol of strength in the highlands of eastern Turkey. The site commands a perfect vantage point. From its summit, the eye can trace the shoreline of Lake Van stretching out to distant snow-capped mountains. In the past, this location controlled vital routes through the region, linking the trade networks of Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Caucasus. To hold Van was to hold the gateway between worlds. For the Urartians, who thrived between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE, this fortress was both a military citadel and a sacred center, a seat of kings and gods, built to dominate both landscape and imagination. The fortress's foundations are carved directly into the limestone bedrock of the ridge. Above them, walls of massive stone blocks rise in terraced levels, connected by stairways and courtyards. The lowest levels were built from immense limestone slabs, while higher sections used lighter tufa and mud brick. This layering technique gave the structure both stability and height, allowing it to endure for millennia. Some of the blocks weigh several tons each, fitted together without mortar, their edges perfectly aligned. The craftsmanship speaks of organized labor, architectural knowledge, and a clear vision of permanence. In the 9th century BCE, the Urartian king Sarduri I established his royal capital here, calling it Tushpa. Inscriptions carved into the rock still bear his name, written in cuneiform script that proclaims his lineage and victories. One such inscription, carved deep into the cliff face, begins with a dedication to the god Haldi, the supreme deity of the Urartian pantheon. For the people of Urartu, divine authority and kingship were inseparable. Their fortresses were temples of power, built not only for defense but for worship. The architecture of Van Fortress reflects this dual purpose. At its summit stood temples and royal residences, while its lower terraces held barracks, storage rooms, and workshops. Archaeological excavations reveal large cisterns carved into the rock to collect rainwater, an essential adaptation for survival in the arid highlands. Channels and stairways connect different levels, forming a complex that combined practicality with grandeur. The scale of the fortress suggests that it housed not only soldiers but also artisans, scribes, and administrators. It was a living city of stone. Urartian art and architecture drew inspiration from both Mesopotamian and Anatolian traditions, yet developed a style uniquely its own. The fortress walls feature characteristic stone-cut precision and monumental inscriptions. Bronze plaques and artifacts recovered from the region depict gods standing on lions, winged figures, and sacred trees, motifs that later influenced neighboring cultures. The Urartians excelled in metalwork, producing weapons, jewelry, and ceremonial vessels of remarkable quality. Within the walls of Van, such craftsmanship would have adorned the palaces of kings, symbols of divine favor and earthly authority. The power of Urartu was built on its mastery of water and stone. Across its territories, the kingdom constructed dams, canals, and fortified cities. The engineering skill seen at Van Fortress reflects a society that understood the relationship between geography and control. The fortress was not merely built on the landscape, it was shaped from it. The natural cliff became both foundation and wall, blending human intention with geological strength. This harmony between construction and environment remains one of Urartu's defining achievements. From its commanding height, the fortress also served as a ceremonial link between earth and sky. Temples dedicated to Haldi and other deities stood on the highest terraces, where fires would have burned in offering. Rituals performed here connected the ruling king to the divine realm, legitimizing his reign. The fortress thus embodied both protection and piety, a sacred citadel overlooking the kingdom's heartland. Every block of stone carried both strategic and spiritual meaning. Throughout its existence, Van Fortress witnessed the rise and fall of empires. The Assyrians to the south often clashed with Urartu, leaving behind inscriptions describing campaigns into the highlands. Yet the fortress remained unconquered for centuries, its defenses too strong and its position too high. When Urartu eventually fell around the 6th century BCE, perhaps to Median or Scythian invasions, the fortress did not vanish. Later civilizations reused its walls, adding their own structures atop ancient foundations. Even as cultures changed, the Ridge of Van remained a seat of power. The inscriptions on the fortress cliffs are among the most valuable records of the Urartian language, related to ancient Armenian. They document royal building projects, dedications, and conquests. One of the most famous, known as the Sardur Tower inscription, proclaims the might of Sarduri and his lineage. Chiseled deep into the rock, its letters remain legible, a message from a vanished kingdom. Speaking across nearly 3 millennia, the precision of the carvings mirrors the precision of the fortress itself. Order imposed upon stone. Archaeological surveys of the site reveal traces of earlier habitation beneath Urartian levels, suggesting that the ridge held strategic importance long before the kingdom's rise. Later, under Persian, Armenian, and Ottoman rule, the fortress continued to serve military and administrative purposes. Layers of history overlap across its terraces, yet the Urartian foundation endures, an unbroken link to an age when kings carved their names in stone as promises to gods. From the lakeshore below, the fortress appears almost like part of the mountain, a vast extension of the earth itself, shaped by human design. Its scale and endurance give it an aura of quiet authority. The same stones that once echoed with royal decrees now stand silent, their purpose transformed but their presence unchanged. Wind moves through the empty chambers, and light strikes the inscriptions at angles that reveal the depth of their carving. The fortress has become its own monument, needing no inhabitants to affirm its significance. The Fortress of Van stands as a testament to the Urartian vision of permanence. It was built not just to resist enemies, but to outlast time. Its walls represent the meeting of faith, strategy, and craftsmanship, a civilization's will turned into architecture. From its summit, one can still imagine the kings of Urartu looking over their kingdom, confident that the stones beneath their feet would hold for eternity. And so they have. Long after the empire vanished, the fortress remains, solid, silent, and enduring. A crown of stone above the waters of Lake Van, watching the world change below it. The tombs of Saqqara's catacombs. Beneath the sands of Saqqara, a vast and silent network of tunnels stretches deep into Egypt's limestone plateau. For centuries, this place remained hidden from the light, a labyrinth of chambers filled not with pharaohs but with animals. Cats, ibises, bulls, crocodiles, falcons, all mummified, wrapped, and buried with ritual care. This is the catacombs of Saqqara, one of the strangest and most haunting sights of the ancient world. Here, religion, ritual, and commerce intersected beneath the surface of a sacred desert. Saqqara was the necropolis of Memphis, Egypt's first great capital. Its surface is famous for monumental pyramids and mastabas, but its secrets lie underground. Beneath the shifting dunes, thousands of corridors cut through the rock, carved during the late period and the Ptolemaic era, long after the age of the pharaohs had passed. Each tunnel once carried the flicker of oil lamps, the scent of incense, and the prayers of pilgrims who came to offer tribute to the gods in animal form. Ancient Egyptians saw animals not merely as creatures, but as living expressions of divine power. The ibis represented Thoth, the god of wisdom. Cats embodied Bastet, protector of home and fertility. Bulls symbolized Apis, linked to strength and renewal. To honor these sacred beings, Egyptians mummified them, sometimes individual animals, sometimes entire species, and placed them in underground galleries beneath temples. Saqqara became one of the greatest centers for this practice, its catacombs expanding over centuries into an underground city of the dead. Archaeologists first entered these passages in the 19th century, guided by local stories and shafts that opened into the desert floor. What they found was astonishing. In the Serapeum, the great vault of the Apis bulls, they discovered granite sarcophagi weighing over 60 tons, each containing a sacred bull, mummified in linen and resin. In nearby galleries, millions of mummified ibises were stacked in pottery jars, row upon row, shelf upon shelf, an industrial scale of devotion. The quantity alone defied imagination, suggesting a constant cycle of ritual preparation, offering and burial. The catacombs of the sacred animals extend beneath multiple temples at Saqqara, each dedicated to a different god. The Bubastian honored Basteti, goddess of cats, whose followers brought offerings of mummified felines. Some cats were household pets offered in gratitude, others were bred specifically for ritual sacrifice. The galleries beneath the temple run for hundreds of meters, filled with thousands of small niches where feline mummies were once placed. Many were wrapped in intricate linen patterns, their faces painted or adorned with bronze masks, symbols of reverence for the divine feminine. Farther north lies the Ibis catacomb, devoted to Thoth. Inside, archaeologists found millions of ibis mummies, stored in ceramic jars sealed with clay. Each jar contained one bird, carefully wrapped and placed as an offering for wisdom or guidance. The ibis, with its curved beak and calm demeanor, embodied learning and language. Pilgrims would pay priests to select and prepare a mummy on their behalf, leaving it as a personal prayer to Thoth. Over centuries, this became both a religious act and an organized economy. Temples managing workshops, breeding animals, and employing artisans to sustain the sacred trade. In another complex, the crocodile catacomb, tunnels snake deep into the bedrock, filled with the preserved bodies of crocodiles dedicated to the god Sobek. Some are massive, several meters long, wrapped in layers of linen. The air in these passages once held the scent of resin and the echo of footsteps on limestone. Here the line between temple and tomb blurred. Devotion was expressed not in gold or statues, but in life itself, transformed through ritual preservation. Each gallery was designed with precision. Long straight corridors were cut with side chambers, their walls smoothed and sometimes inscribed with hieroglyphs. Stone staircases connected upper and lower levels, and niches were arranged with mathematical order. Torches would have flickered against these walls, their light dancing over thousands of linen forms. The tunnels acted as both storage and sanctuary, a mechanical and spiritual system built for eternity. Scientific studies of the mummies have revealed details about how these animals were prepared. The embalming process mirrored that of humans, using oils, salts, and resins to preserve flesh. Linen wrappings were layered carefully, sometimes decorated with patterns or colored dyes. In certain cases, miniature amulets were placed within the wrappings, tiny charms of bronze or faience shaped like ankhs, eyes, or sacred symbols. X-rays and CT scans have shown that some mummies contain complete skeletons, while others were symbolic bundles, crafted offerings representing the essence of the animal rather than its body. The practice of animal mummification reached its height between the 7th and 1st centuries BCE. It reflected both personal piety and state religion. For the Egyptians, each offering was a communication with the divine, a tangible expression of faith. The more offerings made, the greater the divine attention. Saqqara's underground world grew accordingly, generation after generation carving deeper into the rock, filling chambers, sealing entrances, and opening new ones farther along the plateau. These tunnels were not lifeless vaults, they were places of constant activity, priests chanting prayers, scribes recording names, artisans wrapping and painting mummies by lamplight. The catacombs pulsed with devotion. Even the silence that followed, after the last torch went out, carried the echo of those rituals. Every sealed jar, every linen-wrapped body, was a message to eternity. Among the most intriguing finds at Saqqara are the votive stelae and inscriptions left by visitors. Some bear names and prayers carved in hieroglyphs, offering thanks for blessings received. Others include depictions of the gods receiving the animal offerings. These small markers bring the ancient rituals to life, reminders that behind the endless rows of mummies were countless individual hopes, fears, and acts of faith. The animal catacombs also reveal a practical side of ancient Egyptian religion. Managing the demand for offerings required organization, supply, and oversight. Archaeologists have found evidence of breeding facilities near temple complexes, pens for cats and birds, pools for crocodiles. Priests supervised the preparation of mummies, ensuring proper ritual handling. The scale of production was vast, but not mechanical. Each act retained a sacred purpose. Through repetition, devotion became infrastructure. Faith turned into architecture. The preservation of these tunnels over millennia speaks to the durability of Egyptian engineering. Carved into dry limestone, they remain stable even after thousands of years. Their walls still bear traces of soot from oil lamps. In some places, fragments of linen and pottery remain where they fell. The air inside is heavy and cool, filled with the sense of stillness that defines the Egyptian afterlife. A world built to endure, not in sunlight, but in the quiet beneath it. The tombs of Saqqara's catacombs reveal a civilization's deepest conviction that life and death, nature and divinity, were not opposites but reflections of each other. The Egyptians saw the animal world as sacred because it mirrored their gods. Each offering, no matter how small, was part of a cosmic dialogue that kept the universe in balance. Beneath the sands of Saqqara, that dialogue continues in silence. Thousands of eyes that once saw the Nile, now wrapped in linen and placed in eternal vigil beneath the desert floor. The catacombs remain one of the most profound expressions of ancient devotion ever carved into the earth, not built for kings, but for the unseen, the divine, and the countless humble prayers that filled the darkness with meaning. The Mask of Warka. In the arid plains of southern Mesopotamia, beneath layers of ancient earth and broken brick, archaeologists uncovered a face, lifelike, haunting, and carved from marble 5,000 years ago. The Mask of Warka, also known as the Lady of Uruk, is one of the oldest known representations of the human face rendered in naturalistic form. Its features are refined and symmetrical: high cheekbones, delicate lips, and deep-set eyes that once shimmered with inlays of precious stone. Though small in size, it embodies the beginning of portraiture, a moment when humanity learned to capture its own likeness in stone. The discovery was made in the ruins of Uruk, one of the world's first true cities. Around 3000 BCE, Uruk was already a sprawling urban center of temples, palaces, and ziggurats, the beating heart of Sumerian civilization. It was here that writing first appeared, along with monumental art, bureaucracy, and organized religion. Amid these early expressions of human order, the Mask of Warka stands out as something more intimate. It does not depict an abstract god or a symbolic ruler. It shows a person, an idealized, living face. The mask was carved from imported marble, a material not native to Mesopotamia. Its presence alone signals significance, for marble would have been brought from distant lands through complex trade routes. The sculptor shaped it with extraordinary precision, smoothing every surface until it seemed to breathe. The contours of the cheeks, the curve of the lips, the symmetry of the brow, each detail reveals an understanding of human anatomy rare for its time. The eyes, now hollow, were once filled with precious materials, possibly lapis lazuli and shell, creating a gaze that caught and reflected light. The eyebrows and hair may have been inlaid with gold, completing a vision that must have glowed in the flickering light of oil lamps inside a temple. Most scholars believe the Mask of Warka represents the goddess Inanna, known to later generations as Ishtar, the Sumerian goddess of love, fertility, and war. Inanna was both nurturing and fierce, embodying creation and destruction in equal measure. The mask may have been attached to a full wooden statue, now lost to time. If so, it would have stood within a temple dedicated to her, its presence serving as both an idol and a mirror for human devotion. Through it, worshippers could see divinity reflected in a form that was unmistakably human. The artistic style of the Mask of Warka marks a turning point in the history of representation. Earlier figures from Mesopotamia were stylized: large eyes, stiff bodies, abstract expressions. This mask, however, approaches realism. It suggests an artist observing closely, studying how light falls on a face, how emotion shapes a mouth. It represents not only a goddess, but an awakening, the realization that art could capture identity. In its silent gaze lies the beginning of portraiture, a step toward the idea that the divine and human could share a single image. Uruk, where the mask was found, was a city of innovation and contrast. Its monumental temples, the Iani precinct among them, were centers of both worship and administration. Priests recorded transactions on clay tablets, controlled land, and coordinated trade across vast distances. The mask likely belonged to one of these temple complexes, perhaps as part of a cult statue that received offerings and daily care. Sumerians treated divine images as living beings, clothing them, feeding them, and adorning them with jewels. The Mask of Warka may have once been part of such a figure, not an image to be looked at, but a being to be attended. The precision of its carving demonstrates tools and techniques far ahead of its age. Marble is unforgiving. It requires patience, strength, and accuracy. One mistake can destroy a work entirely. The sculptor of Warka must have understood how to read the stone, how to follow its grain and use its hardness to enhance form. The thinness of the eyelids and the evenness of the surface suggest the use of abrasives and copper tools, possibly aided by sand polishing. Every mark was deliberate, every contour an act of intention. Though the mask is missing its eyes and ornaments, its expression remains powerful. The emptiness where the inlays once were gives it an almost timeless aura, serene yet distant, alive yet unreachable. It feels less like an artifact and more like an encounter. To look at it is to meet the gaze of someone who lived 5,000 years ago, or perhaps someone imagined as the perfect reflection of human beauty. It bridges the gulf between the first cities and the modern world with nothing more than a face carved in stone. The Mask of Warka also reflects the political and spiritual life of early Mesopotamia. Warka's rulers associated themselves with Inanna, drawing legitimacy from her divine favor. The goddess was seen as the protector of kingship, granting power and prosperity to those who served her. The creation of a lifelike statue in her image would have been both a religious act and a political one, an embodiment of the divine presence that sanctioned human authority. In that sense, the mask is not only a work of art, but a declaration of civilization itself, a statement that power, beauty, and divinity could be shaped by human hands. The age of Uruk was an age of beginnings. Here humanity first organized itself into complex societies, built monumental architecture, and developed systems of writing and law. Art from this period mirrors that transformation. It shifts from the symbolic to the expressive, from abstract forms to recognizable faces. The Mask of Warka captures that evolution in a single piece. It is both an object and a moment, the instant when humanity learned to represent not just the world, but itself. Over the millennia, Uruk fell silent. Sand buried its ziggurats, temples, and courtyards. Yet beneath those layers the marble face endured. The survival of such a delicate object through thousands of years of erosion, looting, and collapse is itself extraordinary. It remains one of the few fragments of a once-living statue, its survival a quiet defiance against time. Though its meaning has shifted, its impact remains unchanged. It continues to embody the timeless urge to give form to the unseen, to turn divinity into something the human eye can meet. The Mask of Warka stands as both an artifact and an origin. It is the face of a goddess, the face of a civilization, and in a sense the first human face carved from stone to resemble our own. It marks the beginning of a tradition that has carried through every age, the search to understand identity, beauty, and the divine through creation. The artist who shaped it lived in a world just learning what it meant to build, to write, and to imagine permanence. Yet in that moment he captured something eternal, the human desire to be seen, remembered, and made immortal through art. The fortress of Karakoto. In the far reaches of the Gobi Desert, where wind carves dunes into waves of gold and silence stretches for miles, lie the remains of a forgotten city. a place once called Karakoto, the Black City. Its name carries both mystery and omen. To the Mongols who passed through this desolate expanse, it was a haunted ruin swallowed by sand. To archaeologists, it is one of the most haunting discoveries of Central Asia, a fortress city built on the edge of the known world, lost to time and legend. Karakoto was founded more than 8 centuries ago, during the rise of the Tangut people, founders of the Western Xia Empire, a civilization that once stood between China, Mongolia, and Tibet. Around the year 1032 CE, they built this fortress at the frontier of their empire, near the Aegean River, to control the trade routes that crossed the Gobi. For centuries, it thrived as an oasis settlement, a place of walls and water amid the emptiness of desert. Traders, monks, and soldiers passed through its gates, bringing silk, scriptures, and stories from distant lands. From a distance, the ruins of Karakoto still rise from the dunes like the bones of a great beast. Thick earthen walls, nearly 10 meters high, enclose the remains of streets and buildings. Watchtowers stand at the corners, their forms softened by centuries of sand and wind. The city was small, less than half a kilometer across, but its presence dominates the landscape. It was both fortress and sanctuary, a final outpost before the desert swallowed everything beyond. The city's design reflects the precision and order of the Tangut mind. The walls form a perfect rectangle, built from rammed earth reinforced with timber. Within them, streets once ran in neat alignment, leading to marketplaces, temples, and homes. A massive gate faced east, toward the rising sun and the lands of China, another faced west, opening toward the steppes of Mongolia. At its heart stood a stupa, and a series of Buddhist temples, their foundations still visible beneath the sand. The city was both practical and spiritual, a frontier settlement that guarded trade and nourished the soul. For the Tanguts, Karakoto represented more than commerce. It was a symbol of their empire's endurance. The Western Shah had forged a unique identity, blending Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese administration, and steppe tradition. Their script, carved in neat square characters, remains one of the most distinctive writing systems ever developed. Within the city's temples, monks copied Buddhist texts by hand, illuminating manuscripts with pigments and gold. Many of these texts buried in the ruins would later be rediscovered, preserved perfectly by the desert's dry breath. But the glory of Karakoto was not to last. In the early 13th century, the Mongols rose under Genghis Khan, uniting the steppe under a single banner. The Western Shah resisted, and in 1227, after years of conflict, their empire fell. Legends tell that Karakoto continued to survive for a time under Mongol rule, serving as a garrison and trade post. Yet the sands crept closer. By the 14th century, as the Yuan dynasty waned, the city faced isolation, rebellion, and despair. One account claims its final governor, driven by defeat and hunger, broke the dam of the Aegean River, flooding the oasis and dooming his own people. Whether fact or myth, the story became part of the city's shadow, an image of ruin born from desperation. When explorers and archaeologists rediscovered Karakoto centuries later, they found the desert had kept its secret well. The walls still stood, rising from dunes that reached nearly to their battlements. Inside, collapsed houses, temples, and stupa mounds lay buried in layers of sand. The wind had preserved them in stillness, erasing all trace of human noise. In some rooms, murals remained on the walls, faint images of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and celestial guardians painted in the Tangut style. Their colors faded, but their calm expressions untouched. Thousands of artifacts were recovered from the ruins: scrolls written in Tangut, Chinese, and Tibetan, coins and seals, wooden tablets, ceramics, and religious icons. These fragments revealed a world both literate and devout, a city that blended the practicality of a frontier post with the inner life of a monastery. The manuscripts, many of them Buddhist sutras, offered rare insight into the Tangut language and beliefs, preserved nowhere else. The texts spoke of compassion, impermanence, and enlightenment, ideals that echoed faintly through the silence of the ruins. The architecture of Karakoto shows the adaptation of human life to the desert. The thick earthen walls shielded the city from sandstorms and heat, while narrow streets provided shade. Wells and canals brought water from the nearby river, feeding gardens and livestock. Clay ovens and storage pits indicate self-sufficiency, the ability to sustain a population even in isolation. Yet despite its fortifications, the city was ultimately defenseless against nature. When the river shifted and the oasis dried, life withdrew, leaving only the echo of civilization carved into the sand. Legends grew around Karakoto's fall. Nomads told stories of a curse, of spirits that guarded the city and struck down intruders. They spoke of a dark wind that rose whenever someone disturbed its soil. The name Black City came to symbolize both its ruins and its fate. A once bright place turned to shadow. For centuries, travelers avoided it, leaving it to the silence of the dunes. The desert consumed it gradually, as if reclaiming a secret that was never meant to be found. Yet in its silence, Karakoto tells a story larger than its walls. It speaks of how human ambition reaches even the harshest places, how faith and structure persist in the face of isolation. The Tanguts built their city in defiance of the desert, and for a time they succeeded. Their manuscripts, their temples, and their art all reflect a belief in order and balance, even in chaos. The desert may have swallowed their homes, but it also preserved their words, frozen in the still air of buried rooms, waiting for the world to listen again. Standing before the fortress walls, one can imagine the life that once moved here. Merchants unloading silk, monks lighting lamps, guards watching the horizon for travelers, or invaders. The same wind that now scours the ruins once carried the sounds of prayer bells and market cries. The same river that once sustained life still passes nearby, its course altered but its water unchanged. The cycle of creation and erasure, so constant in desert history, continues here more visibly than anywhere else. The fortress of Caracato remains one of the great paradoxes of the ancient world, a city that died but never disappeared. Buried by sand, it endures as both ruin and witness, a frozen memory of a people whose name nearly vanished with their walls. Its story is written not only in the manuscripts found beneath its floors, but in the silence that surrounds it. Out here, where wind replaces time and the horizon hides nothing, the Black City still stands, waiting beneath the endless desert sky. The black stone statue of Shalmaneser. In the ancient heartland of Assyria, where the Tigris once nourished the first empires of recorded history, a single block of black basalt was shaped into a monument of power. The black stone statue of Shalmaneser, carved nearly 3,000 years ago, stands as one of the most imposing royal sculptures ever created. Its surface is smooth yet impenetrable, its features etched with calm authority, the unmistakable presence of a king who once ruled the ancient world. He holds in his hands a tablet covered in cuneiform script, as if presenting the weight of empire itself. The statue was created during the reign of Shalmaneser III, who ruled Assyria from 859 to 824 BCE, a time when the empire was expanding across Mesopotamia with relentless force. His armies marched through the lands of Syria, the Levant, and beyond, building monuments wherever they conquered. But this figure, carved from dense black basalt, was not made for war. It was made to endure, a declaration of divine kingship and earthly dominion, preserved in the language of stone. The statue stands more than 2 meters tall, its proportions massive yet elegant. The king is depicted wearing a long, fringed robe and a headdress adorned with a conical crown, symbols of royal and divine authority. His beard is carefully patterned, each curl carved with mathematical precision, reflecting the Assyrian ideal of order and perfection. His eyes, though blank, seem focused on eternity. In his left hand he holds a tablet, inscribed with cuneiform. In his right, a staff of power. The composition conveys absolute control, a ruler both human and divine, carrying law and command as one. Basalt is one of the hardest stones known to ancient sculptors. Working it required not only strength but mastery of technique. Craftsmen used bronze and iron chisels, along with abrasive sand, to slowly shape the dense material. Every mark was deliberate, every surface polished by patience. The resulting figure exudes permanence, an image meant to outlast both its creator and the empire that raised it. To carve a king from basalt was to declare that his authority was as enduring as the earth itself. The inscriptions on the tablet are as significant as the sculpture itself. Written in Akkadian cuneiform, they proclaim the titles, conquests, and building projects of Shalmaneser III. They record his victories over rebellious cities, his tribute from distant lands, and his devotion to the god Ashur, the divine patron of Assyria. Each line is a blend of history and theology, a written ritual designed to ensure that the king's deeds would echo forever. The statue served as both a royal portrait and a stone archive, merging art with record. Assyrian kings saw themselves as mediators between gods and men, chosen to maintain order across a vast and often hostile world. Their statues were not simply likenesses, they were embodiments of divine presence. To place a royal image within a temple or palace was to extend the king's authority into sacred space. The black stone statue of Shalmaneser likely stood within a temple precinct at Ashur or Nimrud, its dark surface reflecting lamplight in the dim halls of power. Around it, priests and officials would have conducted rituals honoring both ruler and deity, their prayers resonating against the cold stone walls. The symbolism of the statue's color and material deepens its meaning. Black basalt, drawn from volcanic origins, carried associations of strength, endurance, and the underworld. To sculpt a king in such material was to root his identity in the eternal, a connection between the earth's depths and the divine heavens. The reflective surface, once polished to a dark sheen, would have mirrored the flicker of torches, giving the impression of movement within stillness. The stone's density absorbed sound, creating a profound silence around the figure. A silence of power rather than absence. Art in Assyria was never created for beauty alone. It served the machinery of empire. Every sculpture, relief, and inscription was a message, a form of communication from king to subject, from human to god, from the present to eternity. The statue of Shalmaneser fits perfectly within that system. It was both image and proclamation, a declaration of divine right rendered in a medium that could not be destroyed by time or rebellion. Where inscriptions on clay might crumble, basalt would remain. The style of the statue reflects the high point of Assyrian realism and formalism. The human form is proportioned with geometric precision, but emotion is replaced with idealized authority. The king's posture is erect, symmetrical, and balanced, a living law. The details of the beard, robe, and crown reveal the Assyrian obsession with order and hierarchy. Even the tablet he holds is perfectly aligned, as though the written word itself is bound by royal discipline. The sculptor, though anonymous, created not an individual likeness but an icon of kingship, the image of power crystallized in form. Cuneiform inscriptions around the base of the statue extend the narrative of the king's reign. They speak of walls built, cities conquered, temples restored, and lands subdued. Among the victories recorded is the Battle of Karkar, where Shalmaneser faced a coalition of Levantine kings, one of the earliest military alliances in recorded history. Though the battle ended without decisive victory, the inscription proclaims divine favor and inevitable triumph. In Assyrian art, defeat was never recorded, only destiny. The spiritual dimension of the statue cannot be separated from its political one. In the Assyrian worldview, kingship was cosmic. The king stood as the axis between gods and men, his image the physical vessel of divine order. By placing statues in temples, palaces, and borderlands, Assyria extended this sacred authority across space. Each statue was an emissary of control, watching over cities and conquered lands long after the king himself was gone. The black stone statue of Shalmaneser was one such presence, a sentinel of empire, unblinking, immovable, and eternal. Centuries later, when the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonians and Medes, its cities burned, its palaces crumbled, and its libraries turned to ash. But basalt endured. The statue, dark and silent, outlived its builders. It survived the collapse of empire and the fading of language. Its inscriptions, once read only by priests and scribes, now serve as one of the few direct voices from that vanished world. Through it, the ambitions of a king and the craftsmanship of his people remain fixed in stone, unaltered by the erosion of time. The black stone statue of Shalmaneser embodies more than a ruler's pride. It captures the essence of civilization's desire to preserve memory. Its form is both human and geological, an intersection between intellect and endurance. In its gaze there is no mercy or emotion, only permanence. It stands as a reminder that even the mightiest empires fall, yet the will to be remembered persists. The stone does not speak, yet it carries a message older than language. That power, once carved into the earth, leaves an imprint that no age can erase. The Great Wall of Benin. In the dense tropical forests of southern Nigeria, beneath layers of soil and centuries of silence, lie the remains of one of humanity's greatest forgotten constructions. Long before steel, concrete, and modern surveying, an African kingdom built a wall so vast, so carefully engineered, that it stretched across more land than the Great Wall of China. Known as the Great Wall of Benin, it once encircled the ancient kingdom of Benin, a network of earthworks measuring more than 16,000 kilometers in total length. Yet few outside West Africa have ever heard its story. This was no ordinary wall. It was a city's skin, a civilization's heartbeat, molded in clay. The Great Wall of Benin was both boundary and mirror, defining not only the kingdom's reach, but its identity. Rising from the red earth, it separated the sacred center of Benin City, the royal capital, from the vast forests and villages beyond. Built entirely by human hands, it remains the largest single archaeological structure ever made before the modern age. Archaeologists describe it as a combination of ramparts and moats, known locally as Iya and Odo. Together they formed a continuous defensive and ceremonial system around Benin City and its surrounding territories. The construction began as early as 800 CE, evolving over 6 centuries into a labyrinth of walls, embankments, and trenches that connected hundreds of settlements. At its heart was the royal city itself, an organized urban center with avenues, markets, and courtyards laid out in geometric precision. The wall was not built from stone but from earth, shaped and compacted with extraordinary precision. Using simple tools, wooden spades, baskets, and iron blades, laborers dug deep moats and piled the excavated soil into towering embankments. The clay hardened in the equatorial sun until it was as firm as fired brick. Over time, the structure rose to heights of up to 10 meters, its slopes lined with vegetation that helped anchor the soil. When viewed from above, it resembled an immense series of concentric rings radiating outward from the royal palace. The sheer scale of the work defies modern comprehension. Estimates suggest that more than 100 million cubic meters of earth were moved, more than in the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The network stretched across an area larger than most ancient empires. Yet unlike many monumental projects, the Great Wall of Benin was not built by slaves or coerced labor. It was a communal effort, organized through kinship and hierarchy, each village responsible for building and maintaining the section that protected its territory. The wall became not just a defense system but a symbol of shared identity. The Kingdom of Benin flourished between the 13th and 19th centuries. Its rulers, known as Obas, governed through a blend of military power, spiritual authority, and artistic sophistication. Under the great Oba Ejui the Great, in the 15th century, Benin reached its peak. The walls and moats were expanded to their fullest extent, enclosing a city of straight avenues, bronze-cast palaces, and temples to gods and ancestors. The capital was not a chaotic sprawl, but a planned metropolis, one of the most organized cities of the ancient world. Visitors from Europe who reached Benin in the 15th and 16th centuries described a city that astonished them. Portuguese explorers wrote of broad streets as straight as arrows, lined with houses built of clay and wood. The walls that surrounded the city were, they said, greater than any seen in Christendom. Behind those walls lay a culture that valued artistry as much as war, the same culture that produced the famous Benin bronzes, masterpieces of metalwork that captured the faces of kings, warriors, and deities in astonishing detail. The Great Wall was not purely defensive. Its moats also served as trade routes, drainage systems, and sacred boundaries. Some sections were designed to hold water during the rainy season, forming natural barriers that doubled as fish ponds. Others marked spiritual divisions between clans or deities. The wall functioned as a living organism, not just protecting the city, but sustaining it. It was both infrastructure and icon, expressing Benin's mastery of environment and space. In the worldview of the Benin people, land itself was sacred. The act of shaping earth into a wall was a gesture of reverence as much as engineering. The Oba, regarded as both king and priest, was believed to embody the spiritual balance of the kingdom. The walls were extensions of his power, physical manifestations of the order he maintained between humans, nature, and the divine. To maintain them was an act of devotion. To neglect them was to invite disorder. Archaeological surveys of the wall reveal remarkable consistency. Despite its immense size, its alignment follows clear geometric logic. The trenches and embankments form precise loops that interconnect villages like threads in a woven fabric. In some areas, the wall enclosed fields and forests, integrating farmland into the city's defensive perimeter. This design demonstrates not only architectural skill but ecological awareness, a civilization that understood how to live within its landscape rather than conquer it. When British colonial forces invaded Benin in 1897, the city's defenses could not withstand modern artillery. The punitive expedition, as it was called, burned the royal palace, looted its treasures, and dismantled much of the kingdom's authority. The Great Wall, already weakened by neglect, began to erode. The jungle crept back, and entire sections vanished beneath the soil. What remains are traces, lines of earth that still rise from the forest floor, fragments of a network once unmatched in scope or ambition. Yet even in ruin, the wall tells a story of innovation and endurance. Its builders worked without metal machines, without mathematics as the modern world defines it. Yet they achieved something monumental, a structure that blended social cohesion, environmental harmony, and engineering precision. The Great Wall of Benin was not a fortress of conquest, but one of connection, a living architecture that united people, defined community, and anchored memory in the land itself. For those who walk among its remnants, there is a quiet sense of balance. The earth still holds the lines carved by thousands of hands, the imprint of centuries of belief in order and resilience. The moats may be overgrown, the embankments softened by time, but the geometry of civilization remains, a pattern drawn so deeply into the soil that even the forest could not fully erase it. The Great Wall of Benin stands as one of humanity's most profound achievements, not of stone or empire, but of endurance. It reminds us that greatness is not measured only by what rises highest, but by what lasts longest. In the heart of West Africa, beneath the roots and red clay, the traces of that greatness still breathe, the living earthwork of a people who shaped their world from the ground beneath their feet, and whose legacy still whispers through the soil of Benin. The Iron Age chariot burial of Pocklington. In the rolling fields of Yorkshire, beneath a layer of quiet farmland, archaeologists uncovered a burial unlike any other in Britain. A warrior laid to rest, not just with his weapons or ornaments, but with his entire chariot and horses, perfectly preserved after more than 2,000 years. Known as the Pocklington Chariot Burial, this Iron Age tomb offers a glimpse into a lost world of Celtic ritual, honor, and belief. A world where life and death were bound together through the bond between man, beast, and machine. The discovery came in 2018 during routine excavations for construction near the town of Pocklington, in East Yorkshire. At first, it seemed like just another grave from the region's late Iron Age, but as archaeologists brushed away the soil, the outline of a chariot began to emerge. wooden wheels still intact, bronze fittings shining beneath centuries of clay. Then, beside it, the bones of two horses appeared, positioned as though still harnessed to the vehicle, ready to ride into another world. The burial was astonishing, not only for its preservation, but for its symbolism. It was a portrait of status, faith, and the mystery of what ancient people believed came after life ended. Chariot burials are among the rarest forms of prehistoric burial in Europe. They belong to a culture known as the Aras culture, which flourished in eastern Yorkshire between 500 and 100 BCE, a local expression of the wider Latin Celtic world that spread across Iron Age Europe. These were societies of farmers and warriors, organized into tribal confederations, bound by kinship and ritual. The people of this region buried their elite dead with remarkable care, placing them beneath barrows, surrounded by grave goods, weapons, and in rare cases, chariots. The Pocklington burial stands among the finest ever found. The wooden framework of the chariot had decayed, but its iron tires, bronze fittings, and structural traces remained almost entirely in place. The horses, laid on their sides as if in motion, were preserved in remarkable condition, their skulls, teeth, and harness fittings still recognizable. Between them, the central pit contained the remains of a man in his mid-40s, buried with a bronze shield, weapons, and personal adornments. Around him were small offerings, fragments of pottery, animal bones, and iron tools, each one placed with deliberate intent. What makes this burial extraordinary is not just its richness but its emotional clarity. It captures, in stillness, a moment of farewell. The warrior was sent into death as he had lived, a leader, a rider, a man of speed and control. The chariot, symbol of status and motion, became the vessel for his soul. The horses, companions in life, accompanied him into eternity. To bury living animals alongside a human master was an act of deep significance, a ritual that transformed death into continuity. The scene reads like a frozen procession, its meaning carried by gesture rather than words. The symbolism of the chariot in Iron Age culture ran deep. Across Europe, it represented movement between worlds, the power to cross boundaries between the mortal and the divine. In mythology, gods and heroes rode chariots across the sky and into battle. To own one was to hold authority, to be buried with one was to transcend mortality. The people of Pocklington believed that their dead did not vanish, but journeyed onward, and the chariot, drawn by trusted horses, was the means of that journey. The burial is therefore not a statement of wealth but of passage, the eternal motion of spirit. Archaeological analysis of the site reveals how carefully the grave was constructed. A rectangular pit was dug into the chalk, wide enough to fit the chariot and horses. The base was lined with organic material, perhaps wood or reeds, before the burial was placed. The chariot wheels were removed and laid flat beside the body, an arrangement common in Iron Age ritual. The horses were then lowered into position, their reins placed across their bodies. Soil was packed gently around the assemblage, sealing it in darkness. Over time, the minerals of the chalk preserved bones and metals, leaving a ghostly imprint of an entire world beneath the surface. The craftsmanship of the artifacts found within the burial reveals the sophistication of Iron Age Britain. The bronze shield discovered with the warrior, decorated with circular repoussé patterns, is one of the most beautifully preserved examples of Celtic metalwork ever unearthed. Its surface bears a flowing design of spirals and raised bosses, abstract yet harmonious, embodying the Latin style that dominated Celtic art. Such motifs were not decorative in the modern sense. They were spiritual symbols, reflecting cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The shield, polished to brilliance, would have caught sunlight in motion, a reflection of power both physical and divine. For centuries, this world was misunderstood, dismissed as primitive compared to the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome. Yet discoveries like Pocklington reveal something far more complex. Societies guided by artistry, spiritual depth, and an intricate understanding of symbolism. The people of Iron Age Britain may not have built pyramids or written on stone, but they shaped memory through ritual, creating monuments of meaning in the very ground they lived on. The preservation of the horses in particular has stirred fascination. Their bones show no signs of injury, suggesting they were killed quickly and carefully, likely as a sacrificial act. Their positioning, side by side, mirrors depictions of chariot teams in Iron Age art. It suggests a belief that the human and animal souls were intertwined, companions not only in life but in the afterlife. The stillness of their burial conveys a haunting tenderness. Even in death, they remain poised to move. In a broader sense, the Pocklington chariot burial connects to a long tradition of equestrian symbolism that spans continents and millennia. From the horse sacrifices of Central Asia to the chariot burials of ancient China, the image of the ruler and his steeds recurs as a universal expression of status and transcendence. The people who buried their dead at Pocklington were part of that same human continuum, an unbroken line of belief in the journey beyond. When the soil was first removed from the burial pit, the past seemed to rise with it. The air carried the faint scent of earth undisturbed for 2,000 years. Each artifact, each bone, each fragment of harness, spoke of a people who understood death not as an end but as a transformation. They built their tombs with intention, to preserve not only the body, but the idea of continuity, the rhythm of life itself. The Iron Age chariot burial of Pocklington stands as one of Britain's great archaeological revelations, a frozen moment of humanity, preserved by chance and soil. It tells of craftsmanship, devotion, and the profound link between humans and animals. It bridges the gap between archaeology and emotion, showing that even across 2 millennia, the desire to honor the dead remains unchanged. In the end, the warrior of Pocklington rides still, not across the hills of Yorkshire, but through history itself. His chariot, his horses, and his spirit endure beneath the ground, forever in motion, forever on the road between worlds. The cosmic staff of Siberia. In the frozen reaches of Siberia, where endless forests meet the tundra and winter holds the land in silence, archaeologists unearthed a relic unlike any other, a carved wooden staff, more than 5,000 years old, adorned with spirals, lines, and celestial patterns. It lay preserved in the permafrost, buried in ancient peat, its surface still bearing the touch of the hands that carved it. Known as the Cosmic Staff of Siberia, it is one of the oldest surviving wooden artifacts in the world, a symbol from prehistory that seems to speak of the sky, the stars, and humanity's earliest search for meaning beyond the earth. Wood, unlike stone or metal, rarely endures across millennia. It decays, burns, or disappears into the soil. For this staff to survive at all required extraordinary circumstance, a perfect balance of cold, moisture, and darkness. It was found deep within the layers of an ancient Siberian bog, where the absence of oxygen preserved organic material that would otherwise have vanished thousands of years ago. The moment archaeologists brushed away the surrounding peat, a spiral pattern revealed itself, carved with steady, deliberate strokes. As light struck its surface, the artifact seemed to awaken, not as an object, but as a message. The staff measures nearly 2 meters in length. Its form is simple, a smooth, tapering shaft, carved from the wood of birch or larch, but its decoration transforms it into something far greater. The surface is covered with incised motifs, spirals, concentric circles, and zigzag lines that move with rhythmic precision. These patterns are not random. They follow an order that suggests deep symbolic purpose. To those who carved it, these spirals may have represented the movement of the heavens, the cycles of the sun and moon, or the rhythm of life itself. In ancient cultures, the spiral was one of the most universal symbols. It appears in petroglyphs, pottery, and carvings from nearly every corner of the prehistoric world. It represents motion, growth, eternity, the unseen forces that shape existence. On the Siberian staff, the spirals appear in sequence, connected by fine lines that may depict pathways or energy flows. The object's design feels both mathematical and mystical, as though its maker understood nature's geometry, not through measurement, but through intuition. The artifact dates to around 3000 BCE, during the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age, a time when the people of Siberia were hunters, herders, and craftsmen living on the edge of immense wilderness. These communities built no pyramids or temples, but they left behind carvings, tools, and figures that reveal a profound engagement with the cosmos. The staff may have served as a shamanic object, used in rituals to connect the earthly and celestial realms. In many indigenous Siberian traditions, the shaman's staff is more than a tool. It is a bridge between worlds, symbolizing the cosmic tree, the axis that connects the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. The carvings on the staff support this idea. The spirals ascend in orderly progression from base to tip, suggesting movement or transformation. Some lines cross and converge, forming shapes that resemble suns, moons, or constellations. Others spiral inward, as if drawing energy into a single point. The design reads almost like a visual map of the cosmos, a sacred geometry of wood and thought. If this was indeed a shamanic object, it may have been used in ceremonies that involved rhythm, trance, and invocation. The shaman, holding the staff, would have stood as a conduit between the human community and the infinite sky. Siberia's ancient people lived beneath some of the clearest night skies on Earth. With no cities, no light, and endless horizon, the stars must have seemed immeasurable, a shifting canopy of power and mystery. To them, the cosmos was alive, filled with spirits, ancestors, and forces that governed the seasons. The cosmic staff may have been a physical representation of that belief, a portable universe, carved into a single piece of wood, small enough to hold yet vast enough to encompass the heavens. The preservation of the staff in permafrost offers rare insight into the art of a culture that left few lasting monuments. Unlike the durable relics of Egypt or Mesopotamia, the artifacts of the Siberian world were made of perishable materials: wood, leather, bone, and fiber. These materials, shaped by hand, carried stories that disappeared when the objects decayed. The survival of this staff is thus not only a scientific wonder but an emotional one. It allows a glimpse of the invisible, the thoughts of people whose names and words are lost, yet whose gestures remain carved in the grain of wood. Microscopic study of the surface reveals signs of repeated handling. The lower section is worn smooth, suggesting that the staff was gripped and used frequently. The carvings, however, are well preserved, indicating they were sacred rather than purely decorative. Some experts believe the staff was passed down across generations, its meaning evolving as it moved from one shaman to the next. Each spiral, each notch, may have marked a story, a cosmic event, a ritual, a passage of time. Wooden artifacts from similar contexts in Siberia, such as the Shigir idol, the world's oldest known wooden sculpture, suggest a continuous artistic and spiritual tradition spanning thousands of years. Both the idol and the cosmic staff share a visual language of abstraction, repeating lines, symmetrical patterns, and vertical composition. They may represent an ancient worldview in which humans, earth, and sky formed a single continuum. For the people of this land, carving wood was not mere craftsmanship, it was communion. The landscape where the staff was found adds further depth to its mystery. Siberian peatlands are natural time capsules, layers of earth that hold pollen, wood, and bone in near-perfect preservation. Excavations have revealed traces of hearths, tools, and animal remains nearby, suggesting a ritual site or seasonal camp. It is possible that the staff was deliberately placed in the bog as an offering, a final act of devotion to the forces it represented. In many ancient cultures, wetlands were seen as thresholds between worlds, places where spirits could be contacted, and the living could send gifts to the unseen. To hold the cosmic staff, even in imagination, is to feel the distance between ourselves and the people who carved it narrow. The same stars that guided them still shine over Siberia. The same questions about life, order, and eternity still occupy the human mind. This single piece of wood, shaped by hands 5 millennia old, bridges that unbroken thread of curiosity. It shows that even in the cold silence of the ancient north, humanity was already looking upward, already tracing the spirals of the cosmos, already giving shape to wonder. The cosmic staff of Siberia stands as one of the earliest known symbols of humankind's connection to the universe. It carries the marks of both intelligence and reverence, the sense that creation is vast but not unknowable, that order can be found even in the stars. Preserved by accident, rediscovered by persistence, it remains what it was meant to be, a conduit between the material and the infinite, carved from the living wood of the earth, still whispering the oldest story there is, that humanity has always looked beyond itself, and always will. The golden mask of Agamemnon. In the rocky hills of southern Greece, among the ruins of ancient Mycenae, a gleam of gold once caught the light of a rising sun. It came from within a royal grave. A face, sculpted from hammered gold, lay gently over the bones of a long-dead man. The archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann, who uncovered it in 1876, believed he had found the remains of Agamemnon, the legendary king of Mycenae, who led the Greeks to Troy. He called it the face of Agamemnon, but the mask was older, centuries older than the mythic king himself. And yet, as it rests in silence, the name has never left it. The golden mask of Agamemnon is one of the most haunting images of ancient Greece, a portrait not of a man, but of an idea. It is the image of power rendered immortal, the human face made eternal, through metal and craft. Its features are calm, symmetrical, and almost serene: arched eyebrows, almond-shaped eyes closed in rest, a narrow nose, and a thin, sculpted mouth. A pointed beard and mustache frame the face, suggesting dignity, authority, and peace. The paradox of death presented with the stillness of command. The mask was found in Grave Circle A, a royal cemetery within the citadel of Mycenae. Beneath layers of earth and stone, Schliemann uncovered a series of shaft graves containing the remains of elite warriors, each surrounded by weapons, jewelry, and golden ornaments. When he lifted this mask from one of the graves, he believed he was staring at the man whose name had echoed through Homer's Iliad. "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon," he wrote. But time would prove the mask much older, dating to around 1550 BCE, nearly 3 centuries before the Trojan War is said to have taken place. Yet the name persisted, because it fits something deeper than chronology. The mask embodies what Agamemnon represents, the ideal of kingship, the union of myth and history. In its stillness, it contains the dignity of a ruler, who stood between the world of men and the world of gods. It is not merely a burial object but a statement, a declaration that power, even when extinguished, must endure in form. The creation of such a mask required extraordinary skill. It was made from a single sheet of gold, beaten into shape with hammers and wooden tools using the repoussé technique. where details are formed by hammering from the reverse side, then refined from the front. The gold was thin yet resilient. Its surface worked to capture delicate contours and expression. It was not cast or molded, but drawn forth from metal, as if from light itself. The result is astonishingly lifelike, an image that still seems to breathe beneath its polished surface. Gold, to the Mycenaeans, was the material of immortality. It did not tarnish or decay. To cover a face in gold was to preserve not only the features but the essence of the dead. The mask acted as a boundary between mortality and eternity, ensuring that the soul retained identity in the afterlife. It was both armor and mirror, protection against oblivion, and reflection of divine power. The man beneath it, whoever he was, had lived as part of a warrior aristocracy that ruled the Aegean long before classical Greece, long before Athens or Sparta, when the Mycenaean world was the center of its own universe. Archaeologists believe the graves of Mycenae held the early rulers of the civilization that would dominate the late Bronze Age. These were kings who commanded armies, traded with Egypt and the Near East, and ruled from citadels crowned with massive cyclopean walls. Their world was one of fortresses, palaces, and ritual splendor, a world that would give birth to legends. The mask was part of this system of belief, an emblem of divine kingship and eternal remembrance. There were other masks in the graves, simpler, less refined, but none matched the craftsmanship of this one. The face is unique, expressive yet idealized, human yet otherworldly. Its maker may have intended to depict not the man himself but the archetype of a ruler, the distilled image of leadership. The gold was not only wealth, it was symbol, a statement that the dead king had become one with the sun, shining forever beyond death. When Schliemann found the mask, it lay upon a skeleton surrounded by gold cups, weapons, and ornaments. Around the head were traces of cloth that may have once covered the body, now long gone. The mask itself had been gently shaped to fit over the face, pressed along the contours of nose, eyes, and mouth. The care with which it was placed suggests a ritual of reverence, a farewell that combined grief and triumph. To those who buried him, the man beneath it was not simply dead, he had transcended. The mystery of the mask's subject remains unsolved. Some believe it belonged to an early Mycenaean ruler, perhaps the ancestor of the later kings who inspired Greek legend. Others see it as a ceremonial likeness, made to represent royal power rather than an individual. Whatever its origin, its effect is undeniable. When light strikes the metal, the features seem to emerge from shadow, not as a corpse but as a presence. It is a face that defies death, not by expression but by endurance. In the Mycenaean worldview, death was not an end, but a transformation. The elite dead were buried with their weapons, jewelry, and masks, symbols of their identity and achievements. The golden mask served to ensure that identity survived the passage to the underworld. It linked the physical and spiritual, anchoring the soul within its image. For the living, it was also a reflection of continuity, the assurance that leadership, lineage, and divine favor would persist through the generations. When viewed closely, the mask reveals subtle imperfections, slight asymmetries in the eyebrows, faint irregularities in the lips. These flaws are what make it human. It is not the face of an idealized god, but of a man seen through the lens of reverence. The sculptor who hammered it into being captured something that transcends technique, the quiet dignity of the mortal face. The artistry transforms metal into memory, and memory into myth. The mask's power lies not only in its beauty, but in its silence. It says nothing, yet it holds everything. The weight of history, legend, and longing. It is both artifact and apparition. For more than 3,000 years, it has outlasted the walls of Mycenae, the fires of time, and the civilizations that came after. And still, it gazes upward with eyes that are closed yet seeing, lips that are sealed yet speaking in gold. The golden mask of Agamemnon stands as one of humanity's most haunting images, the face of a king who may never have lived, but whose story has never died. It captures the earliest fusion of myth and material, the moment when art became memory, and memory became immortality. Beneath its thin sheet of gold lies not only a man, but the eternal question of what it means to be remembered, to leave behind a face when all else fades to dust. The fortress of Shar-e-Sokhta, the burnt city. In the silent deserts of southeastern Iran, where wind moves over sand like breath over ancient memory, lie the ruins of a Bronze Age metropolis known as Shar-e-Sokhta, the burnt city. From a distance it appears as nothing more than a vast scatter of clay mounds under the relentless sun. Yet beneath this barren surface rests one of the most advanced and enigmatic civilizations of the 3rd millennium BCE, a city that flourished, burned, and vanished long before the empires of Persia rose from the same soil. Shar-e-Sokhta stood at the edge of a desert plateau, near the Helmand River basin. Its people built a city unlike any other of its time, a complex urban center with streets, workshops, storage areas, and a citadel that served as both fortress and administrative heart. This was not a small settlement on the margins of history. It was one of the great cities of the ancient world. Archaeologists estimate that at its peak, around 3200 BCE, it covered over 150 hectares and held a population of several thousand. Its size rivaled those of early Mesopotamian cities, yet it developed independently, sustained by trade routes that connected the Indus Valley, Central Asia, and Mesopotamia. The name Burnt City comes from the layer of ash that covers its ruins, the result of repeated fires that marked the city's decline. Yet within that layer, something remarkable was preserved. Excavations have revealed not just pottery and architecture, but direct evidence of human life, and of thought, ingenuity, and care. The discoveries made here have rewritten what we know about the Bronze Age. Among them, the world's oldest known artificial eye, evidence of early brain surgery, and even an ancient game board reminiscent of modern backgammon. The fortress of Shari Sokta dominated the settlement's northern edge, built from mud brick and packed earth. Its walls rose above the surrounding houses, offering both defense and oversight. Its thick ramparts and watchtowers commanded views across the desert plain, protecting a city whose prosperity depended on trade and irrigation. Inside its boundaries, archaeologists have found storage rooms, administrative seals, and signs of organized labor, the fingerprints of bureaucracy, in an age when writing was still young. The fortress was not only a wall of defense but a structure of order, designed to maintain balance in a society that thrived on connection. From within these walls, artisans and engineers worked with astonishing sophistication. Pottery recovered from the site displays both technical mastery and artistic expression, vessels painted with dynamic motifs of animals and geometric patterns that seem to move when spun. One pot, found in the remains of a craftsman's house, depicts a sequence of 5 images of a goat leaping toward a tree, the earliest known example of animation in human history. When the vessel is rotated, the images blend into motion, capturing in clay the same impulse that would, millennia later, give birth to cinema. But perhaps the most extraordinary find came from a grave, the skull of a young woman who lived around 2800 BCE. Careful study revealed that she had undergone cranial surgery. A circular hole had been cut into her skull, likely to relieve pressure from a head injury or illness. The bone around the incision shows signs of healing, meaning she survived the procedure. This discovery pushes the practice of neurosurgery back thousands of years earlier than once believed, showing that the people of Shari Sokta understood anatomy and medicine far beyond what history had assumed. Nearby, another burial revealed the remains of a woman with an artificial eye, the earliest prosthetic known to science. Made from natural tar mixed with animal fat and gold dust, it was delicately shaped and inset with tiny threads to mimic veins. It had been held in place by a fine cord, worn against the skin for years. The attention to realism and function suggests that it was not merely decorative, but meant to restore dignity and presence. The woman's status in society must have been high, perhaps a healer, priestess, or noble. Through her eye, the burnt city quite literally saw into history. Archaeologists have also uncovered evidence of complex social and intellectual life: tools, jewelry, spindle whorls, and tablets bearing proto-writing. One of the most intriguing discoveries is a board game, made of wood and inlaid with turquoise and lapis lazuli, with patterned squares and small tokens. Its layout resembles that of the game of 20 squares, known from Mesopotamia, suggesting contact or shared cultural ideas across regions separated by thousands of kilometers. The people of Shari Sokht did not live in isolation. They were part of a network of civilizations that traded not only goods but symbols, ideas, and imagination. Despite its advancements, the burnt city's life was brief. Around 2100 BCE, after several cycles of prosperity and disaster, the city was abandoned. Layers of ash and collapsed walls show that it was struck by multiple fires, perhaps from war, perhaps from internal collapse or environmental change. The river that sustained it may have shifted course, leaving the once fertile plain to wither. Yet even as the population disappeared, the structures remained intact under desert sands, preserved by the same dryness that erased its memory. For nearly 4,000 years, Shari Sokht slept, untouched, unmentioned, unknown. When it was finally rediscovered in the 20th century, the scale of its achievement stunned archaeologists. Unlike other ancient cities, its ruins bore no signs of monumental temples or royal palaces. Instead, it revealed a civilization that valued skill, balance, and intellect, a society organized around artisans, traders, and healers rather than kings. The absence of weapons and fortifications beyond the main citadel suggests that Shari Sokta was less a kingdom of conquest and more a community of knowledge and craft. Its power lay not in armies but in understanding. The city's planning reflects this. Streets were laid out in orderly grids with drainage systems and wells. Workshops for lapis lazuli and turquoise suggest specialized industries. The presence of imported materials, obsidian, tin, carnelian, points to trade stretching from Central Asia to the Persian Gulf. It was, in every sense, a crossroads of early civilization. Yet its fate, like that of so many Bronze Age cities, was to vanish quietly, leaving only questions in the sand. Standing amid its remains, one can still trace the outlines of rooms, streets, and the citadel walls. The desert wind moves through them softly, as if carrying voices from the past. The murmur of potters shaping clay, the faint laughter of players over a board of turquoise, the steady rhythm of tools against stone. The city may be silent, but its legacy endures in the details. The carved staff, the eye of gold dust, the healed skull, the spiraling goat on painted clay. The fortress of Shahari Sokta, the burnt city, is more than an archaeological site. It is a reminder that civilization does not begin with conquest or monuments, but with curiosity, with the will to create, to heal, to see. Its people built in mud brick and dreamt in color. They looked inward, to the human body and mind, and outward, to the stars and the shape of motion. In the dust of their city lies the earliest echo of the modern spirit, the desire to understand life itself, to preserve it, and to leave behind something that endures beyond the flames. The giant hand of the Atacama. In the vast emptiness of northern Chile, where the Atacama Desert stretches like an ocean of stone, a colossal hand rises from the sand, silent, surreal, and alone. Its fingers reach toward the pale blue sky, sculpted from concrete and dust, weathered by wind and time. Known as the Mano del Desierto, or Hand of the Desert. It stands over 11 meters tall, its palm half buried in the earth. To those who stumble upon it, it feels almost impossible, a monument without explanation, an apparition in one of the driest places on earth. The Atacama is a place of extremes. It is one of the oldest and most arid deserts on the planet, a landscape so barren that parts of it have not seen rain in centuries. Here there are no trees, no rivers, no natural shelter, only rock, salt, and silence. And yet, out of this silence, a single human gesture emerges. A hand, immense and motionless, as if caught in the act of reaching for something just beyond grasp. Officially, the sculpture was created in 1992 by Chilean artist Mario Iradaval. It was commissioned by local groups as a monument to human resilience and suffering, a work of contemporary art placed deliberately in the middle of nowhere. But over time, the hand took on a life of its own. For travelers, explorers, and wanderers who cross the Atacama, it feels ancient, as if it belongs to another age, perhaps one that predates history altogether. From a distance, it appears weathered, eroded, fossilized, like something that has been waiting under the desert for millennia, only now revealing itself to the light. In that illusion lies its power. The hand of the desert blurs the line between artifact and imagination, between sculpture and symbol. It is modern, yes, yet it carries the weight of something eternal. Its form, simple and human, evokes countless images from our shared past. The handprints on Paleolithic cave walls, the carved petroglyphs of early tribes, the clay impressions left by artisans in ancient workshops. Across tens of thousands of years, the human hand has always been both mark and message, a sign of presence, proof that we were here. To stand before the hand of the desert is to feel that same impulse, magnified. It is not merely a piece of concrete, it is an idea turned into landscape. Its size amplifies its meaning. A single gesture made monumental, speaking not through words but through silence. The artist once described it as a symbol of human helplessness, loneliness, and hope, a cry for connection in a place that offers none. In a desert where even sound dissolves, the hand seems to ask for something timeless, for memory, for touch, for recognition. At night, the sculpture takes on another life. Under the weight of 1,000,000 stars, it seems almost alive, a sentinel of humanity reaching into the cosmos. The desert, lit only by starlight, mirrors the vastness of space itself, and the hand appears as though it might bridge the two. The same gesture carved into sand could just as easily have been carved into time, a universal motion, a reaching upward, a refusal to vanish. What makes the hand of the desert so haunting is not just its isolation but its ambiguity. There are no signs, no plaques, no nearby towns. It exists without context, like a question left in the sand. Travelers often find themselves stopping not out of curiosity, but instinct, as though drawn towards something familiar. Some see it as a symbol of resistance, others as a relic of a forgotten people. In truth, it is both none and all of these. It belongs to the collective memory of humanity, to that long lineage of symbols that connects cave art to skyscrapers, pyramids to monuments. The Atacama itself deepens this sense of mystery. It is a place where ancient and modern blur together. Beneath its surface lie pre-Columbian roads, forgotten cemeteries, and mummified remains older than the pharaohs. The desert's dryness preserves everything: bones, fabrics, footprints. In some valleys, geoglyphs stretch across hillsides, vast figures of llamas, birds, and spirals etched by ancient hands. Against this backdrop, the hand of the desert seems less a modern creation, and more a continuation, the latest chapter in humanity's dialogue with the land. Seen up close, the sculpture bears the rough texture of concrete, its surface cracked and pitted from decades of wind. Sand gathers between its fingers. The material, though industrial, feels almost organic, as if the earth itself has shaped the form. Its color blends with the surrounding hills, turning gold at sunrise, gray at midday, and red at dusk. As the light changes, so does its mood. At dawn it appears calm, at noon defiant, and by nightfall almost mournful. It is art that breathes through atmosphere. The hand's orientation is deliberate. It faces east, toward the Andes, the direction of the rising sun. To the artist, this gesture was meant as a greeting to light and renewal, but it also mirrors ancient symbols of rebirth and ascension found in cultures across the world. From the open palms carved on Egyptian tombs to the raised hands painted in Aboriginal rock shelters, the gesture of the uplifted hand has always carried meaning. It is both protection and offering, both farewell and invocation. Over time, myths have grown around the hand of the desert. Some say it marks the grave of an ancient giant, others imagine it as a monument left by an earlier civilization, a signal to the gods, a relic of some vanished race. Though untrue, these stories reveal something profound, that the human mind seeks myth in the presence of mystery. Even when we know an object's origin, our instincts look for the deeper layer, the feeling beneath the fact. The hand of the desert is, in the end, less about its creation and more about its context. Placed within one of the most lifeless environments on Earth, it becomes a symbol of life itself, a reminder that even in isolation, humanity leaves traces of emotion, purpose, and imagination. It stands alone, yet it speaks for everyone. It is both monument and mirror. For travelers who find it, the experience is almost spiritual. There are no crowds, no noise, only the wind, the sound of sand shifting against the concrete, and the endless horizon. The hand rises not in triumph but in endurance, the quiet persistence of existence itself. Standing before it, one can't help but feel both small and connected, to those who came before, and to those who will come after. The giant hand of the Atacama may be a work of modern art, but it feels ancient because its language is eternal. It reminds us that the most powerful monuments are not those that tell us what to think, but those that make us feel what cannot be said. In a desert that seems to erase everything, the hand endures, half buried, half reaching, a timeless gesture of humanity against the infinite. The megalithic tombs of Bougon. In the gentle countryside of western France, among fields and low forests brushed by wind, a series of ancient mounds rise quietly from the earth. They are not tall or imposing at first glance. Grassy domes that blend almost seamlessly with the landscape. Yet beneath them lie the tombs of Bougon, some of the oldest and most sophisticated megalithic chambers in all of Western Europe, long before the pyramids of Egypt, before Stonehenge, before metal or written language. People here were already building monuments to eternity, shaping stone to guard their dead, and perhaps to speak to the unseen. The Tumulus de Bougon, as the site is known, dates back to around 4800 BCE, deep into the Neolithic era. It is a complex of 6 burial mounds, or tumuli, constructed over centuries by farming communities who lived along the Thouet River in what is now western France. These early builders were among the first in Europe to raise massive stones for ritual and burial, pioneering an architectural tradition that would spread across the continent. The tombs they left behind are not only feats of engineering, but profound expressions of belief, a conversation between humanity and mortality that has lasted 7,000 years. Each tumulus at Bougon is unique. Some are small, simple mounds covering a single chamber. Others are vast structures with multiple passageways, chambers and layers built in successive stages. The largest, known as Tumulus F, stretches nearly 70 meters across and contains several stone-built rooms connected by corridors. Inside, archaeologists found the remains of dozens of individuals, carefully arranged along with grave goods, pottery, tools, ornaments, and offerings. The chambers were roofed with enormous stone slabs, some weighing over 30 tons, transported and positioned with astonishing precision using only Stone Age tools and human labor. The stones themselves are local limestone, cut and shaped by hand. Their surfaces still bear the marks of ancient chisels and ropes, traces of the hands that moved them. How these early farmers achieved such precision remains a subject of fascination. They had no metal, no wheel, and no beasts of burden capable of pulling such weight. Yet they aligned and placed these megaliths in deliberate patterns, balancing weight and symmetry with a sense of purpose that goes beyond simple practicality. The builders of Bougon were part of the first generation of Europeans to settle permanently on the land. They cultivated crops, domesticated animals, and began to define their place in nature. In building tombs of this scale, they declared that place as sacred, not just to the living, but to those who had passed. The act of construction itself was a communal ritual, uniting the efforts of families and generations. Each stone was an offering, each chamber a bridge between the temporal and the eternal. When the tombs were first excavated in the 19th and 20th centuries, archaeologists discovered that they had been used repeatedly over centuries. Bodies were laid to rest, and later, the tombs were reopened, perhaps to add new members of the community, perhaps to perform rituals of remembrance. This cyclical use of the tombs reveals a worldview in which death was not an ending but a return, a movement through time that mirrored the rhythm of the seasons, the planting and harvesting of the earth. Among the most striking discoveries at Bugon were the collective burials, large numbers of individuals placed together within the same chamber. These were not tombs of kings or elites, but of communities. Men, women, and children were laid side by side, sometimes accompanied by objects of everyday life: flint blades, polished axes, beads made from shell or bone. The presence of children among the burials speaks of families, of continuity. These were people who believed that the bond between generations extended beyond death. In one of the oldest chambers, archaeologists found the partial remains of at least 100 individuals. Over time, bones had been moved and rearranged, perhaps as part of ritual practices involving the ancestors. Skulls were grouped together, long bones aligned, as though the living had maintained an ongoing relationship with those who came before. The tombs were not sealed and forgotten, they were revisited, reopened, and renewed. The architecture of Bugon also suggests a deep awareness of the landscape and the heavens. The entrances of several tumuli align with the rising or setting sun at certain times of year, particularly around the solstices. This alignment, repeated in megalithic structures across Europe, hints at an early understanding of cosmic order, the link between the cycles of the sky and the cycles of life and death. For these Neolithic builders, the tomb was not only a house for the dead, but a reflection of the universe itself, a microcosm of stone mirroring the patterns of stars and seasons. The effort required to build these tombs speaks to the organization and cooperation of early societies. Moving and placing stones of such size would have required hundreds of people, ropes, sledges, and wooden rollers. The builders likely timed their work with the rhythm of the year, constructing when harvests were done, when the community could gather in unity. Each tumulus thus represents a collective act of devotion and endurance, a shared statement that life's meaning extended beyond the individual. Over the centuries, new mounds were added, expanding the necropolis into a landscape of memory. The tombs evolved in design, growing more elaborate as techniques and traditions matured, yet the purpose remained the same: to honor, to connect, to preserve. In this way, the people of Bugon left behind not just architecture, but intention, a message carved in weight and silence. When you stand before the tumuli today, there is no grandeur, no towering columns or carved inscriptions. The mounds are humble in form, softened by grass and time, but their quiet power lies in their endurance. They have survived floods, wars, and the slow erosion of millennia. Beneath them, the same chambers remain, filled with bones, with offerings, with the presence of those who lived and died before civilization had a name. Inside one of the restored chambers, light enters through a narrow opening, illuminating the stone walls in a soft glow. It is easy to imagine the first builders doing the same, stepping into the chamber to place their dead, speaking words that no one now remembers, feeling the same mix of grief and reverence that has followed humanity since the beginning. The megalithic tombs of Bugon stand as a reminder that architecture began not with palaces or fortresses, but with memory. These were not monuments to the living, but to the invisible, to the bond between people, land, and time. They show that even in prehistory, humans sought permanence in the face of impermanence, meaning in the face of silence. 7,000 years have passed, yet the stones still hold their shape, their weight, their quiet promise. They are among the oldest surviving expressions of human faith, not in gods or empires, but in continuity itself. Beneath the soft hills of Bugon, the first builders of Europe rest within their creation, and the earth still remembers their touch. The giant stone disk of Bashkiria. Deep in the forested mountains of Bashkiria, in the southern reaches of the Ural Range, a team of explorers unearthed something that defied both expectation and explanation. A massive circular stone disk, perfectly round, more than 3.5 meters across, and half buried in the earth as though placed there deliberately. Its surface, smooth and uniform, caught the light in a way that made it look almost metallic, yet it was stone, dense, ancient, and silent. The giant stone disk of Bashkiria has become one of the most intriguing and controversial archaeological discoveries in Russia's recent history. Found in a region rich with Paleolithic sites and geological oddities, it sits at the intersection of myth and science. Was it a natural formation shaped by eons of erosion and pressure? Or was it carved, lifted, and placed by human hands long before written history? The question remains open, and the answer lies buried in both geology and imagination. The discovery was made during quarrying operations in the Bashkir Mountains, near a site known for its ancient rock strata. Workers uncovered a section of unusual material, a perfectly curved surface unlike the surrounding bedrock. As the excavation continued, the full form of the object emerged, a stone disc measuring roughly 3.5 meters in diameter and weighing several tons. Its edge was sharply defined, its center raised slightly like a hub. To the miners who found it, it looked less like a natural boulder and more like something constructed, like a wheel, or perhaps, as some whispered, a record of something forgotten. Geologists who examined the find determined that the disc was made primarily of sandstone, compacted under immense pressure. Some identified traces of quartz and mineral veins radiating from the center, creating a pattern that gave it an almost engineered appearance. The layers of stone, compressed over millions of years, had fractured in such a way that the shape seemed intentional, as if nature itself had mimicked design, but others were not convinced it was natural. The regularity of its circumference, the symmetry of its surface, and its orientation within the surrounding strata suggested to some researchers that it had been worked by hand. Ancient Bashkir legends speak of wheels of the sky and stones that fell from above, echoes of events that might once have inspired myth. To those who have studied the artifact, the disc seems to straddle the boundary between geological formation and human creation, belonging equally to both realms. The landscape of Bashkiria itself lends weight to the mystery. The Ural Mountains are among the oldest ranges on Earth, their slopes scattered with prehistoric sites, caves painted with mammoths, megalithic walls, and mysterious petroglyphs etched into stone. For millennia, this region has been a crossroads between Europe and Asia, a place where cultures met and stories mingled. The discovery of a perfectly circular stone in such a setting invites questions that stretch beyond simple classification. Those who have stood before the disc describe its presence as strangely commanding. Half buried in the ground, tilted at an angle, it resembles a colossal wheel frozen in time, a symbol of motion arrested, of technology imagined before its age. When sunlight strikes its surface, shadows fall in even arcs, tracing its symmetry like the markings of a sundial. Some researchers have speculated that it could have served as a ceremonial object or astronomical marker, a tool for observing the heavens. Others see it as part of a megalithic complex yet to be uncovered. However, geological evidence suggests another possibility, that the disk formed through concretion, a process in which minerals accumulate around a nucleus over vast stretches of time, creating spherical or disc-like shapes. Similar formations have been found elsewhere in the world, some small, some massive, all shaped by slow natural forces rather than human hands. Yet even so, the Bashkiria disk stands out for its size, perfection, and placement. It is too regular, too deliberate, to dismiss entirely as accident. Whether natural or crafted, its effect is the same. It captures the imagination. It reminds us that not all mysteries must resolve into certainty, that some discoveries remain bridges between fact and wonder. The stone itself offers no inscription, no clue. Its silence forces us to listen differently, to read meaning not in words but in form. The people who live near the site tell stories about the disk. Some say it was part of an ancient machine, buried by floods or earthquakes long ago. Others believe it marks a sacred site, a boundary between worlds. In local folklore, circular stones are often associated with time, symbols of cycles, seasons, and rebirth. Whether or not these tales have roots in the disk's origin, they reveal something enduring, humanity's need to explain what it cannot yet understand. Archaeologists and geologists have continued to study the region, uncovering additional circular stone fragments nearby. Each new find deepens the question: are these remnants of the same natural process, or pieces of a structure that once stood in its entirety? Some suggest that the discs may have been quarried in antiquity, perhaps used for grinding grain or ritual purposes, later abandoned and buried by the movement of earth and water. Others propose that they were never tools at all, but natural wonders that ancient peoples recognized and revered for their form. Standing before the Bashkiria disk, one feels the weight of time pressing from both directions, from the deep geological past that shaped the stone, and from the human centuries that have passed since its rediscovery. The air is still, the ground dry. The disk's surface, weathered yet unbroken, seems to hold the memory of countless seasons. Whatever its origin, it stands as a monument to endurance, a circle drawn in stone, unending and unexplainable. To look at it is to confront the strange unity of nature and creation, how both, in their own ways, carve meaning into matter. Whether formed by the patient hand of earth or the purposeful hands of early humans, the giant stone disk of Bashkiria embodies the oldest artistic gesture there is, the act of giving shape to mystery. It reminds us that the line between artifact and accident is thin, that wonder often begins in the space between knowledge and silence. It lies there still, half covered by soil and time, its curve perfect against the roughness of the mountain, a silent question carved into the earth itself. and perhaps that is its true message, that some questions are not meant to be solved, only witnessed, a reminder that even in an age of certainty, the world still holds places where the ancient and the unknown meet, and where a single circle of stone can still stop us in our tracks, asking us to listen to the past with open eyes. The Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III. In the vast desert of Dashur, south of Cairo, stands a pyramid that has nearly vanished into the color of the earth itself. Its once sharp lines have crumbled, its summit has sunk, and its surface, darkened by age and material, gave it its haunting name, the Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III. From a distance it looks more like a ruined hill than a royal tomb, yet beneath its collapsed walls lies one of the most intricate and mysterious pyramid complexes of Egypt's Middle Kingdom. A monument that failed as an engineering project but succeeded as a symbol of endurance, secrecy, and hidden design. Built around 1850 BCE, during Egypt's 12th dynasty, the Black Pyramid was conceived by Amenemhat III, one of the greatest pharaohs of his age. He ruled a prosperous, stable Egypt, a time of architectural experimentation and expansion. Instead of constructing his pyramid from solid limestone, as his ancestors had done in the Old Kingdom, Amenemhat chose to build from mud brick, encased in limestone and plaster. It was a bold innovation, faster and cheaper to build, but it would also prove catastrophic. The heavy structure began to sink almost as soon as it was completed. The desert clay beneath it unable to bear the weight, the casing cracked, the core shifted, and over time the entire pyramid began to collapse inward. Today the remains of the pyramid rise only a fraction of their original height. What was once a grand monument, reaching toward the heavens, has become a shadow of itself, a sloping mound of dark, fractured earth. Yet the destruction above ground hides an astonishing preservation below. Beneath the ruined exterior lies a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, still largely intact, hidden from the world for nearly 4,000 years. When archaeologists first entered the interior in the late 19th century, they found an architecture unlike that of any other Egyptian pyramid. Instead of a single corridor leading to one burial chamber, the Black Pyramid contains an entire network, a honeycomb of passageways, false doors, and secret rooms. The design was deliberate, meant to confuse tomb robbers and protect what lay within. The corridors twist, rise, and descend, in patterns that seem almost symbolic, as though mapping the journey of the soul through the underworld. At the heart of this maze lies the burial chamber of Amenemhat III, constructed from massive blocks of polished quartzite. The chamber is so precisely built that even now the joints between stones are nearly invisible. Above it, an elaborate system of relieving chambers, designed to distribute the immense weight of the pyramid, shows the ingenuity of Middle Kingdom engineering. Though the pyramid itself failed structurally, its internal architecture remains a masterpiece of planning and purpose. One of the most remarkable discoveries within the complex was that Amenemhat did not rest there alone. Beside his burial chambers were tombs prepared for two royal women, likely his queens or daughters, each with their own sarcophagi and sets of canopic jars. Their names, inscribed on fragments of alabaster and gold, include Queen Afet and Princess Neferupta, who is known to have played a significant role during her father's reign. These multiple burials suggest that the pyramid served not just as a royal tomb, but as a family necropolis, a house of eternity for the bloodline of a king. The pyramid's name in ancient Egyptian was Amenemhet is mighty and perfect, a reflection of its intended grandeur. Its dark color, however, would later define it in history. The mud brick core, once encased in gleaming white limestone, darkened over millennia, giving it the appearance of shadow against the desert. The contrast between its intended brilliance and its eventual decay mirrors the paradox of the Middle Kingdom itself, a time of extraordinary innovation shadowed by fragility. Archaeological excavation revealed that the pyramid had been looted in antiquity, yet traces of untouched burial chambers were found deep within, sealed by hidden corridors and false doors. These inner sanctuaries contained fragments of royal jewelry, delicate inlay work, and small funerary figurines. In one section, inscriptions dedicated to Osiris and Anubis remain faintly visible, carved into limestone blocks now stained with time. These texts, invoking protection and rebirth, suggest that the Black Pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a cosmic diagram, a map for resurrection. What makes the structure extraordinary is not its failure, but its symbolism. The pyramid's physical collapse did not erase its purpose. Instead, it became a metaphor for transformation. Amenemhat's architects sought to master both material and spiritual realms. Even as the outer form sank, the inner sanctum held firm, a microcosm of Egyptian belief, where the visible world might perish, but the hidden one endured. The complex surrounding the pyramid was equally elaborate. Archaeologists uncovered remains of temples, storage rooms, and processional causeways, all aligned according to celestial and ritual principles. The mortuary temple, once adorned with carved reliefs and painted walls, stood directly before the pyramid's east face, facing the rising sun, symbolizing rebirth. To the west, the desert stretched endlessly, the realm of the dead. The pyramid thus sat at the boundary between light and shadow, life and eternity. To the ancient Egyptians, this location was deliberate. Dashur, already home to the bent pyramid and the red pyramid of earlier kings, was a sacred landscape, a place where pharaohs sought to connect with both their ancestors and the gods. Amenemhat's decision to build here tied his reign to that lineage. In doing so, he placed his monument in the continuum of Egypt's architectural evolution, a continuation of the pyramid tradition, adapted to the changing spirit of his age. Standing at the site today, the pyramid appears almost swallowed by the desert. The wind moves over it quietly, erasing its edges, softening its geometry. Yet its foundations remain vast, stretching below the surface like roots of an ancient tree. From above, the faint outline of its square base is still visible, 105 meters on each side, the ghost of a design that once reached more than 70 meters high. Beneath it, the chambers remain cool and dark, their walls inscribed with symbols of endurance. In many ways, the Black Pyramid is not a monument to perfection, but to persistence. It embodies the human desire to create permanence in an impermanent world. Its crumbling form reminds us that even in failure, meaning survives. The architects who built it could not prevent its collapse, but they achieved something far greater. They ensured that its essence would remain. Every civilization leaves behind its broken monuments, structures that speak as much through their ruins as through their triumphs. The Black Pyramid of Amenemhat III stands among them as a paradoxical masterpiece, a fallen pyramid that still guards its secrets, a ruin that has not ceased to teach. Beneath its darkened surface lies the mind of an age that understood something timeless, that even when stone falls, memory endures, and that beneath the silence of decay, the spirit of creation still whispers from the sand. The obsidian mirror of Tezcatlipoca. In the heart of ancient Mexico, long before the arrival of conquistadors, the Aztecs saw the world as a reflection, a surface shimmering between the real and the unseen. To them, mirrors were not merely objects, they were gateways. Among these, none held more power or reverence than those carved from obsidian, the black volcanic glass born from fire. Smooth, flawless, and darker than night, obsidian mirrored not faces, but spirits, and one such mirror, known today as the Mirror of Tezcatlipoca, was believed to reveal the will of gods. Tezcatlipoca, whose name means smoking mirror, was one of the most powerful and enigmatic deities of the Aztec pantheon, a god of destiny, darkness, sorcery, and change. He was both creator and destroyer, both light and shadow. His mirror was his emblem, a symbol of divine sight and deception. Through it, he could see all human acts, even those hidden by night. For his priests, the mirror became an instrument of divination, used to summon visions, to speak with spirits, and to seek knowledge that lay beyond mortal reach. The obsidian mirror itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship and ritual. Polished from a single volcanic stone, it was ground until its surface became perfectly reflective, a void of black glass that absorbed light rather than returning it. When one looked into it, there was no clear image, only depth, an infinite darkness that seemed to move beneath the surface. For the Aztecs, this was the essence of the divine, not light, but reflection, not certainty, but vision. The mirror, found in central Mexico and now housed in museum collections around the world, including the most famous one once belonging to the Elizabethan magician John Dee, has its origins in these Aztec traditions. To the people who made it, obsidian was not simply stone, it was sacred fire cooled by the gods. It came from volcanoes, the places where the earth itself breathed and bled. The process of transforming this brittle glass into a flawless mirror required immense skill. The artisans ground it with sand and water, polishing for days until it revealed a surface smoother than metal. What they created was not an object of vanity, but a portal, a medium for communion between the human and the divine. In Aztec ritual, priests used such mirrors in ceremonies dedicated to Tezcatlipoca. They would hold the mirror aloft during night vigils, letting moonlight glint across its surface. The mirror's darkness was believed to reveal omens and prophecies. Smoke and incense filled the temples as the priests gazed into it, awaiting visions, the appearance of ancestors, the signs of war, or messages from the gods. The mirror was not a tool of sight, but of surrender. It required the viewer to give up ordinary perception and enter the realm of the unseen. The mythology surrounding Tezcatlipoca reinforces this connection between reflection and reality. He was the god who could appear in any form: jaguar, wind, night sky, or mirror. In the creation stories, he once opposed the god Quetzalcoatl, each representing opposite forces of order and chaos. When Tezcatlipoca was struck from the heavens, he fell to earth and became the first sun, until he was torn down again, replaced, and reborn. His mirror symbolized that cycle of transformation, destruction, and renewal, reflected endlessly upon itself. Archaeological discoveries of obsidian mirrors in Aztec and earlier Teotihuacan contexts reveal their widespread ritual use. Many have been found buried in temples, altars, and tombs, often placed facing upward, as if waiting for the sky to return its gaze. Some are small, worn as pendants; others, large and ceremonial, meant to rest upon sacred platforms. Their surfaces still gleam after centuries, untouched by corrosion. Even now they seem alive, absorbing rather than reflecting light, holding within them the same depth that once inspired fear and awe. For the Aztecs, mirrors were also instruments of kingship. The emperor himself, considered a living embodiment of divine power, was described as the earthly reflection of Tezcatlipoca. When he sat upon his throne, a polished mirror was placed before him, representing the god's presence. It was said that through the mirror, the ruler could see beyond distance and time, into the hearts of his subjects, into the designs of fate. The act of looking into it was both a privilege and a burden. To see was to know, and to know was to be judged. The mirror's perfect blackness symbolized not evil, but totality, the completeness of the universe before creation. In Aztec cosmology, the color black was sacred, the hue of the night sky where the gods moved unseen. Obsidian, born from volcanoes, carried the essence of that divine darkness. When polished into a mirror, it became the physical embodiment of the god himself. Priests often adorned the surface with feather and gold frames, turning the plain disk into a radiant circle of contrast, light surrounding void. Beyond ritual, obsidian mirrors also served as instruments of power. Shamans and rulers were believed to use them for scrying, a form of vision or prophecy. They would stare into the dark surface until the boundaries between self and reflection dissolved, and images appeared of events, places, or spirits. In such moments, time and space lost their meaning. The mirror was both stage and doorway, showing what could not otherwise be seen. When Spanish chroniclers arrived in the 16th century, they recorded with unease the ceremonies of the Aztec priests, noting the black mirrors held during their rituals. To the Europeans, they were symbols of superstition or sorcery, but to the people of Mexico, they were instruments of truth, reflections of a world larger than the visible one. Even after conquest, the symbolism of the obsidian mirror persisted. Fragments of the tradition survived in local crafts, myths, and spiritual practices, echoing a time when reflection was sacred and shadow was divine. Centuries later, one such mirror would travel far from its birthplace. Acquired by explorers and collectors, an Aztec obsidian mirror eventually came into the possession of John Dee, the English mathematician, astronomer, and advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Dee used it as a scrying device, believing he could contact angels and spirits through its surface. For him, as for the priests of Tezcatlipoca, the mirror represented a window between worlds. Though the context had changed, the idea remained the same, that the dark surface could hold light of another kind. To look into the obsidian mirror of Tezcatlipoca even now is to confront that same depth. It reflects nothing, yet it gives back something more. An awareness of how thin the boundary is between myth and matter, between the ancient and the present. The hand that carved it may be long gone, but the vision it offered still endures. That truth does not always lie in brightness, but in darkness, that invites understanding. The mirror endures as both object and metaphor, a circle of black glass, smooth as silence, older than empire, deeper than sight. It remains what it always was, an image of power, perception, and transformation. The Aztecs believed that to look into it was to see oneself stripped of illusion, to meet the god within the reflection. Perhaps that is why it still unsettles and fascinates, because even after 500 years, the mirror has not stopped watching back. The giant hand axe of Kent. In the quiet hills of southern England, where the chalky soil meets the River Medway, a team of archaeologists made a discovery that forced them to rethink what they thought they knew about early humans. Buried deep in Ice Age sediments near Kent, they uncovered something massive, not a bone, not a fossil, but a tool. It was a hand axe, chipped from flint with unmistakable skill, but it was not like any other hand axe they had ever seen. It was enormous, more than 30 centimeters long, heavy enough to strain a modern hand, too large for use, too perfect to dismiss. This object, the giant hand axe of Kent, belongs to a lineage of tools that shaped the human world long before metal, writing, or cities. Hand axes are among the oldest technologies on Earth, appearing over 1 million years ago, and used by species that came before modern humans. They were multi-purpose instruments for cutting meat, carving wood, scraping hides, and shaping other stones. But this vast flint blade from the depths of time, was different. It seemed made not for work, but for something else, perhaps for meaning. Archaeologists found it while excavating Ice Age layers dating to around 300,000 years ago, a time when England was home to Homo heidelbergensis, the robust ancestors of both Neanderthals and modern humans. These early people lived in a world of extremes: cold tundras, shifting rivers, and vast herds of animals moving across open plains. Flint was their lifeline, their most precious resource. They chipped it with remarkable control, producing tools that fit comfortably into the hand, sharp-edged, balanced, functional. Yet among the hundreds of such tools found across Europe, a few stand out for their sheer scale. The Kent hand axe is one of the largest. When it was lifted from the ground, its surface glimmered under layers of ancient sediment, smooth, curved, and symmetrical. It was not a random piece of stone. Every flake removed had been planned, each strike precise, producing a teardrop-shaped blade with edges that still catch the light. But its size, too large for practical cutting, immediately raised questions. Who made it, and why? Was it a demonstration of skill, a ceremonial object, or a symbol of status? To hold it is to feel both its power and its impossibility. The axe weighs several kilograms, too heavy to swing for long, too awkward to wield efficiently. Yet the hands that shaped it followed the same logic as those that made smaller tools, the same craftsmanship, the same geometry. It was made deliberately, not by accident. Some archaeologists believe that such oversized hand axes were made as displays of strength or mastery, a kind of prehistoric art form, proof that their maker could control stone beyond necessity. Others suggest they were made for ritual use, offerings to ancestors, the earth, or unseen forces that early humans felt but could not name. What makes the Kent hand axe so haunting is not just its size, but its age. It was created in a world without language as we know it, without civilization, without even stable climate. Yet whoever made it possessed something recognizably human, the urge to create beauty and meaning. The flint was struck not just to cut, but to express. In its sweeping curves and sharp symmetry lies the same aesthetic impulse that would later shape art, sculpture, and architecture. The flint from which the hand axe was made came from the chalk deposits of southern Britain, a material prized for its durability and sharpness. Flint knapping, the art of shaping stone, required both knowledge and intuition. Early humans selected the right nodules, struck them at precise angles, and read the fractures like language. Each strike was a sentence in stone, and each finished tool carried the memory of its maker's hand. The Kent hand axe shows mastery at a level that suggests both skill and intention, the culmination of experience passed down through generations. Nearby, smaller hand axes were also found, standard tools used for butchering and woodworking. This context is crucial. The giant axe was part of a larger toolkit, yet stood apart. It may have been created as a symbol of leadership, as a way of marking identity within a group. In a world where survival depended on cooperation, tools were more than instruments, they were extensions of self. To craft one larger and finer than necessary might have been a statement, a silent proof of mastery, power, or devotion. Some researchers propose that such artifacts might even represent early forms of aesthetic consciousness, an awareness of proportion, symmetry, and form for its own sake. The Kent hand axe, with its almost perfect outline, may have been admired not for its utility, but for its beauty. To shape stone into something balanced and flawless required more than need, it required imagination. In this sense, the giant axe might be one of humanity's earliest artworks, not drawn on cave walls, but carved directly from the earth. The flint's surface carries marks of age, mineral stains, small chips, faint patina, each a record of time measured not in centuries, but in geological epochs. It has survived through ice ages, floods, and forest growth, lying buried while continents shifted and climates changed. When we encounter it now, it stands as a messenger from a time before history, before memory, a fragment of the human mind preserved in stone. The scale of the artifact also invites another question. Could it have been made for ceremonial burial or offering? Sites across the prehistoric world show evidence of symbolic deposits, tools placed deliberately in rivers, caves, or pits, never meant to be used. Some of these may have been tributes to nature, or gestures of gratitude for successful hunts. The Kent axe, found in sediment layers that once bordered a watercourse, might have been such an offering, a gift to the landscape itself. In the broader story of evolution, this single object holds deep resonance. It bridges the gap between instinct and thought, between survival and meaning. The people who made it lived harsh, uncertain lives, yet even in such a world, they took time to make something more than functional, something that transcended need. That act, small as it may seem, marks the beginning of what it means to be human. When viewed under light, the axe reveals a subtle sheen, a mirror of time itself. Its edges are dulled but unbroken, its symmetry undistorted. It remains almost exactly as it was when last held by its maker, hundreds of thousands of years ago. The weight, the balance, the curve, all preserved. To imagine that moment is to glimpse an early mind at work, shaping not just a tool but an idea. The giant hand axe of Kent is both artifact and symbol, a piece of evidence that early humans were more than hunters and gatherers. They were thinkers, dreamers, and creators. In its quiet perfection lies a universal truth, that even in the depths of prehistory, people were already reaching beyond necessity, crafting meaning from matter. It lies now as it did then, heavy, silent, eternal, a message from a forgotten craftsman who spoke only through stone, whose language was form, whose signature was symmetry. Long before words, before gods, before cities, a hand shaped this tool with purpose. And across the gulf of time, that purpose still speaks, not of function, but of wonder. The lost city of Muzawar, at Es Sufra. In the golden silence of the Sudanese desert, where the wind traces patterns across endless sand, stand the ruins of a forgotten complex unlike any other in the Nile Valley. Broken columns rise from yellow dust. Walls etched with ancient carvings catch the fading light, and scattered among them are images of elephants, dozens of them, carved into stone as if to honor some vanished presence. This is Muzawar, at Es Sufra, the Yellow Place, a sprawling temple city that once thrived in the ancient kingdom of Kush, a place whose purpose, even now, remains an enigma. Hidden among rocky hills northeast of the Nile, Muzawar Es Sufra dates back more than 2,000 years, to the height of the Meroitic period, when the Nubian kings ruled from their desert capitals and built monuments that rivaled those of Egypt. Yet, unlike other royal centers, this site was not a simple temple or settlement. It was a labyrinth, a vast complex of courtyards, ramps, and walls stretching across several hectares, filled with carvings, altars, and sacred enclosures. It feels less like a city of people, and more like a city of purpose, a place built for something unseen, its meaning lost in time. The heart of Musawarat is a structure known as the Great Enclosure, an immense rectangular complex surrounded by high walls. Inside, corridors twist and connect in bewildering patterns. There are courtyards within courtyards, stairways leading nowhere, and platforms whose use is unknown. Archaeologists have called it one of the most mysterious monuments in all of Nubia. Some believe it was a religious center, others a pilgrimage site, a training ground for priests, or even an ancient sanctuary for animals. The only clear clue lies in the carvings. Elephants, carved everywhere, on walls and doorways, columns and reliefs. The elephants are not incidental decorations, they dominate the iconography of the site. Some are shown in procession, others carrying people or symbols. In ancient Nubia, elephants held immense spiritual and royal significance. They were creatures of strength and wisdom, symbols of divine power and memory. But here, their presence is overwhelming, almost obsessive. The scale and repetition suggest that Musawarat may have been a center of elephant worship, or perhaps a sanctuary where these great animals were kept, trained, or revered. Excavations have uncovered wide ramps and courtyards, large enough to accommodate elephants. Some scholars believe the complex may have functioned as an elephant training ground, possibly connected to royal or military use. In antiquity, war elephants were prized symbols of power across Africa and the Near East, used by kings and generals as living embodiments of might. If true, Musawarat may have been one of the few places in history where such creatures were domesticated and ritualized. Yet there are details that complicate this theory. Within the Great Enclosure, archaeologists found altars, offering tables and shrines that clearly belonged to a temple tradition. Reliefs depict not only elephants but gods, kings, and sacred symbols associated with Amun, the chief deity of both Egypt and Kush. These clues point to a deeper spiritual function. Perhaps the elephants were not trained for war, but honored as sacred manifestations of divine strength, part of rituals connecting the rulers of Kush to the gods themselves. The site's layout reinforces this sense of mystery. The architecture of Musawarat is unlike that of any other Kushite or Egyptian temple. Its walls are unusually thick, its corridors seemingly designed for movement rather than congregation. The sheer size of the enclosure, nearly 250 meters long, dwarfs most known temples of its era. Within its walls, archaeologists found wells, reservoirs, and evidence of complex water systems, suggesting that the site was once lush and carefully maintained. To build such a place in the middle of the desert would have required enormous effort, hundreds of workers, years of labor, and a vision that stretched beyond practical necessity. Some believe the Great Enclosure was part of a pilgrimage center, dedicated to the god Apetamek, the lion-headed warrior god, unique to Nubia. Nearby temples, including the smaller but exquisitely carved lion temple, support this theory. Its walls show detailed scenes of kings making offerings to Apetamek and Amun, surrounded by intricate hieroglyphs and sacred animals. The artistry is both Egyptian and uniquely Nubian, a blend of two civilizations that shared the Nile, yet maintained their own identities. Standing among these ruins today, one can still sense the silence that once filled these walls, a silence not of emptiness, but of reverence. The stone blocks, cut with precision and fitted without mortar, have survived centuries of heat and wind. Some bear inscriptions that remain undeciphered, fragments of the Meroitic script, the written language of Kush that has resisted translation for nearly 2 centuries. Without understanding those words, we can only guess what Musawarat truly meant to those who built it. What is clear is that it was a place of gathering, a site where people came not to live, but to participate. Whether in ritual, ceremony, or service, thousands may have entered these courtyards, carrying offerings, leading animals, singing hymns to gods whose names we only partly know. The very structure of the complex, with its interconnected paths, suggests movement and procession, a choreography of devotion played out in stone. In the desert light, the carvings of elephants seem almost to move. Their outlines, worn but clear, capture not just anatomy but emotion, the curve of a trunk, the forward stride, the weight of majesty. The artists who carved them knew their subjects intimately, suggesting that elephants were more than symbols here. They were companions in ritual, perhaps even participants in sacred rites. It is rare in ancient art to see animals given such prominence, treated not as background but as central figures. Musawarat stands alone in that regard, a monument to the bond between humanity and the natural world. For centuries after its abandonment, the complex lay buried and silent. Nomads and travelers spoke of the City of Elephants, a place swallowed by sand and guarded by spirits. When archaeologists rediscovered it in the 19th century, the sheer scale of the ruins stunned them. They called it an architectural puzzle in stone, and even after decades of study, that description still holds. The purpose of Musawarat as Sufra remains uncertain: a temple, a training ground, a sanctuary, or all three at once. Whatever its function, the site speaks of a civilization both connected to and distinct from Egypt. The Kushites who built it were not imitators but innovators, blending imported ideas with their own sacred traditions. They built in stone, not merely to honor gods, but to leave behind something that would endure, something that would outlast language, empire, and time. The lost city of Musawarat as Sufra remains a riddle written in sandstone, a place where architecture becomes theology and silence becomes story. The elephants carved into its walls are more than decoration. They are witnesses, guardians of memory, echoing a time when the desert was alive with ceremony and song. In their shadows, one can still imagine the sound of drums, the movement of processions, the distant trumpeting of sacred animals beneath a burning sky. And though the desert has reclaimed much of it, the spirit of Musawarat endures, half forgotten, half remembered, like a vision seen through heat and time, still reaching across the centuries to remind us that mystery, too, is a form of memory. The Stone Tower of Jericho. In the Jordan Valley, near the edge of a fertile oasis surrounded by desert hills, stands what may be the oldest monument ever built by human hands, the Stone Tower of Jericho. Rising from the Neolithic layers of the world's oldest known city, it is a structure so ancient that it predates writing, metal, pottery, and the pyramids. Built more than 11,000 years ago, when farming was still a new experiment and the last ice age had barely ended, this tower marks the moment when humanity began to think in stone, to build not just for shelter, but for meaning. The remains of ancient Jericho, or Tel Sultan, lie near the Jordan River, where a natural spring has sustained life for tens of thousands of years. Here, hunter-gatherers first began to settle, cultivating barley and wheat, and building permanent homes of mud brick. Among these early dwellings, rising unexpectedly from the earth, is the tower, circular, massive, and deliberate. At its base it measures over 8 meters in diameter, and though much of it has eroded, it once stood nearly 9 meters high, the height of a modern 3-story building. For people living in small round huts of clay and reed, such a structure must have been unimaginable. The tower is not a house, not a wall, not a tomb. It was something entirely new, a monument, a human statement carved into time itself. The tower's construction was precise, built from undressed limestone blocks fitted together without mortar. It rises around a solid core with a spiral interior staircase, a remarkable feat for such an early era. The stones, hauled from nearby hills, were shaped and stacked with skill that suggests generations of practice and cooperation. Archaeologists estimate that it would have taken hundreds of people weeks to complete, a communal effort requiring not only labor but planning, leadership, and shared purpose. At its base, the tower connects to an ancient wall that once encircled the settlement. For decades, scholars debated whether this was a defensive wall, a flood barrier, or part of a ceremonial enclosure. But the tower itself stands apart, too massive, too well built to serve a purely practical role. It may have served multiple purposes at once: watchtower, ritual platform, or even a kind of proto-temple. One theory suggests that the tower was aligned with the sunset during the summer solstice, When the sun dipped behind the nearby mountains, its light would have cast a long shadow over the settlement, perhaps marking a seasonal ritual tied to harvest and renewal. If true, the tower may represent humanity's first attempt to build in harmony with the sky, to translate cosmic patterns into architecture. Others believe it symbolized protection and community identity, a physical anchor for a people newly rooted to the land. In a world still shaped by uncertainty, where nature was powerful and unpredictable, the tower may have been both reassurance and warning, a sign that human effort could create order amid chaos. Excavations inside the structure revealed a staircase spiraling up from a narrow entrance. The steps, worn smooth by time, suggest movement, people ascending and descending, in ritual or observation. From the top, one could see across the fertile plains of Jericho, the shimmering oasis below, and the barren desert beyond. That view of life bordered by desolation might itself have been sacred, a visual reminder of the delicate balance between survival and loss. Archaeologists have long debated who built the tower and why. The inhabitants of Jericho at this time, known to scholars as part of the pre-pottery Neolithic culture, lived in an age of transition. They had begun to domesticate plants and animals, but still hunted and gathered. They were the first to live in permanent settlements, but not yet urban in the modern sense. In that fragile beginning of civilization, the tower appears as a declaration that these people were no longer wanderers. They had chosen a place, and in that choice, they marked it with stone. The tower's discovery in the 1950s changed how archaeologists understood prehistory. Until then, monumental architecture was thought to have begun much later, in Egypt, Mesopotamia, or Anatolia. But the Jericho Tower, dating to around 9000 BCE, pushed the origins of large-scale construction thousands of years further back. It showed that even at the dawn of agriculture, humans were already thinking beyond the practical, imagining permanence, power, and presence. The purpose of the structure may also have been tied to death and ancestry. Beneath the homes of Jericho's early inhabitants, archaeologists found human skulls carefully buried and plastered, their faces reshaped with clay. The living and the dead shared the same space, united in memory and ritual. It is possible that the tower served as a link between these worlds, a bridge between earth and sky, between ancestors and descendants. In many early cultures, high places were seen as closer to the divine. The people of Jericho may have built their tower as a stairway for spirits, a vertical symbol of continuity between generations. The effort required to build it would have transformed society. To raise such a structure, dozens or even hundreds of people needed to coordinate, to quarry, transport, and place stones, to organize food and water, to plan each level. This cooperation implies a new kind of leadership and shared identity, an early form of community organization, born from construction itself. In a way, the tower is not just a monument, but a record of social evolution. Over the centuries that followed, Jericho would be rebuilt and destroyed many times. New layers rose above the old, until the ancient tower was buried, forgotten beneath meters of soil. Yet its stones endured, protected by the earth. When archaeologists uncovered it, the tower still seemed to radiate purpose, its form simple, its message eternal. To stand before it now, even as a ruin, is to face the beginnings of architecture itself, the first step from necessity to imagination. Its builders were people who had just begun to control their environment, yet they already sought to build something that would last beyond their own lives. The stones they laid were not only for function, but for faith, a belief in endurance. The stone tower of Jericho stands as the first monument of human civilization, a symbol of awakening. It was built by people who had no written language, no metal tools, no empire, yet they understood the power of height, of gathering, of permanence. They looked at the landscape and decided to rise above it, to claim a piece of eternity with their hands. More than 11 millennia later, its shadow still falls across our understanding of who we are. It reminds us that the impulse to build, to create structure, memory, and meaning, is not new. It is as old as humanity itself. The tower endures not as a ruin, but as a beginning, a whisper from the dawn of civilization, when the first builders of the world lifted stone upon stone, and in doing so, lifted themselves. The burial caves of Bet She'arim, carved into the limestone hills of northern Israel, beneath olive trees and the dry hume of summer air, lies a hidden city of the dead, a vast network of underground tombs known as the burial caves of Bet She'arim. From the outside, the landscape appears ordinary, gentle hills, patches of grass, the silence of an ancient countryside, but below the surface stretches a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, a necropolis hewn from living rock, filled with hundreds of sarcophagi, inscriptions, and carvings that together form one of the most haunting and beautiful testaments to life, death, and memory in the ancient world. Beit She'arim was once a thriving Jewish town during the Roman period, around the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE. Yet it is not the city above ground that made it immortal. It is what lies beneath, Within its hills, craftsmen carved monumental burial caves, unlike any others in the region. They were not simple graves, but carefully designed catacombs created to house generations of the dead. The chambers stretch deep underground, connected by tunnels wide enough for processions. Their walls are covered with reliefs, inscriptions, and symbols drawn from a civilization caught between tradition and empire. Archaeologists have identified more than 30 separate cave systems within the necropolis, each containing dozens of sarcophagi, heavy limestone coffins, some weighing several tons, carved with astonishing detail. Many are decorated with garlands, lions, eagles, wreaths, and mythological figures, motifs drawn from the Greco-Roman world, adapted into Jewish art. Between them appear inscriptions in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and even Latin, names, blessings, and messages to the dead. Together, they tell a story of cultural exchange, resilience, and faith that endured under foreign rule. Beit She'arim became the chief burial site of the Jewish diaspora after the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. For centuries, Jews from across the Mediterranean, from Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, and beyond, brought their dead here to rest. The reason was deeply symbolic. The site held the tomb of Rabbi Judah Hanasi, one of Judaism's greatest scholars and the compiler of the Mishnah, the foundational text of Jewish law. His burial transformed Beit She'arim into a sacred place, a spiritual center where the living sought to rest beside the righteous. The caves reflect both reverence and artistry. The entrances were sealed with massive stone doors carved to resemble wooden planks, each turning on a pivot cut from the same block of stone. Inside, the air turns cool and still. The walls open into chambers, each lined with sarcophagi arranged in order, like silent witnesses to a faith that refused to fade. Torchlight glimmers across carvings of menorahs, 7-branched lamps, symbols of the temple in Jerusalem, standing beside eagles, flowers, and vines. The blending of symbols shows a community that lived in two worlds, holding to its ancient beliefs while embracing the artistic language of empire. The necropolis is not uniform. Some caves were made for families, others for entire communities. In certain chambers, the ceilings are high and arched, with niches carved into the walls. In others, the corridors wind through darkness into new passages, revealing more tombs, more names, more memory. Each was cut directly from the hillside, one chisel mark at a time. The labor was immense, every chamber an act of devotion, every carving a dialogue between the living and the departed. Among the most remarkable discoveries at Beit She'arim are the inscriptions left behind. Some are formal, invoking peace upon the dead. Others are deeply personal. One inscription reads simply, "Good luck in your resurrection." Another warns potential grave robbers. "If anyone opens this tomb, he will have no rest among the living." These voices, carved into stone, carry across the centuries fragments of human fear, hope, and affection preserved in the quiet of the rock. The art itself is a reflection of the world Beit She'arim belonged to. The Jews of Roman Palestine lived at a crossroads of cultures, between East and West, faith and empire. Their art adopted the realism and ornament of Greek tradition, yet it remained firmly anchored in monotheistic belief. No human faces appear in the Jewish tombs. Instead, symbols of eternity and faith fill the space. The menorah, the pomegranate, the olive branch, the shofar. Each image carries layers of meaning. The menorah as divine light, the olive as peace and endurance, the pomegranate as life and abundance. The largest and most elaborate of the caves, known as the Cave of the Coffins, contains more than 130 sarcophagi, their lids shaped and decorated with exceptional care. One sarcophagus bears sculpted lions guarding the sides, protectors of the soul within. Another features a carved wreath held by winged figures, echoing Roman funerary art. Yet here the wreath symbolizes victory, not in battle, but in faith. The fusion of styles is not contradiction, it is continuity, proof that cultures, even under pressure, find ways to adapt and endure. The tomb of Rabbi Judah Hanasi itself lies deeper still. His burial chamber is simple compared to the others, perhaps intentionally humble. Yet its presence transformed the hill into a place of pilgrimage. For centuries after his death, mourners traveled long distances to bury their loved ones nearby, believing proximity to the sage would ensure divine favor in the world to come. The caves became a gathering place not only for bodies, but for belief, a silent city of devotion carved by generations seeking connection beyond death. Archaeologists exploring the site in the 20th century found traces of lamps, pottery, and coins left by visitors who entered these caves long after they were sealed, evidence that the memory of the dead remained alive in ritual. The carvings, though worn by time, still bear the marks of the chisel, the human gesture preserved. When light touches those grooves, the artistry seems to reawaken. The stone almost breathes. The architecture of Beit She'arim reveals more than just engineering skill. It reveals a philosophy, the understanding that stone could preserve what words could not. The builders of these catacombs were not creating monuments for display. They were creating places of permanence, of faith anchored in endurance. The world above could change. Kingdoms could rise and fall, but below, in the earth, their names would remain safe, carved where no empire could erase them. Even now, stepping into those tunnels is like stepping into another world. The air is cool, heavy with the scent of limestone. Every footstep echoes. Every chamber opens into silence. There is no sound but your own breathing and the slow awareness that you are walking among those who once lived, loved, and believed. It is not a place of fear, but of stillness, a reminder that death was never seen as an end, but as continuation. The burial caves of Beit She'arim stand as one of the most extraordinary expressions of collective memory in human history. They represent the resilience of a people who, exiled and dispersed, turned the act of burial into an act of hope. The stone they carved was both tomb and testament, a declaration that identity, belief, and spirit could survive even in the shadow of empire. And as the centuries passed, when the city above was forgotten and the desert winds reclaimed the land, the voices beneath the earth remained. Carved in silence, they still speak, not in sorrow, but in endurance. For the people who built these tombs, immortality was not a miracle. It was a matter of memory, of names inscribed in stone, of faith strong enough to outlast time itself. The ancient city of Lothal. In the dry plains of Gujarat, India, where the Sabarmati River once met the sea, lie the ruins of a city that changed how humans built, traded, and dreamed. Beneath a landscape of dust and salt, archaeologists uncovered a place unlike any other from the ancient world. A city that possessed streets aligned by geometry, homes built with drainage, and a dockyard that may have harnessed the tides. This was Lothal, one of the southern jewels of the Indus Valley civilization. A civilization that flourished more than 4,000 years ago, and yet, in many ways, still feels ahead of its time. The name Lothal means Mound of the Dead in Gujarati, echoing its connection to a past both vibrant and forgotten. Around 2400 BCE, when Egypt's pyramids were rising and Mesopotamia's kings were carving their laws into stone, the people of Lothal were building with mathematical precision. Their streets ran in straight lines, their houses were arranged in blocks, and their water systems were advanced enough to rival those of cities thousands of years younger. But what set Lothal apart was its dockyard, the first known of its kind in the ancient world. To the people who built it, the sea was not a boundary, but a bridge. The Indus civilization, stretching from the mountains of Afghanistan to the shores of the Arabian Sea, thrived on trade, beads, shells, timber, and metal moving between lands. Lothal was one of its most important ports, linking inland cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa to distant regions across the sea, Oman, Bahrain, Mesopotamia. Archaeologists found evidence of trade goods from both directions, copper from the west, carnelian beads from the Indus, and seals stamped with intricate symbols that served as the signatures of merchants. The dockyard itself remains one of the most remarkable pieces of ancient engineering ever discovered. Built from carefully fitted burnt bricks, it measures over 200 meters in length, with a channel that once connected directly to the Sabarmati River, and through it, to the Gulf of Khambat. The design shows an understanding of tidal movement. The builders anticipated the rise and fall of the sea, creating sluice gates and inlets that could control the flow of water. Ships could enter during high tide, unload their cargo, and depart as the waters receded. For the 3rd millennium BCE, this level of hydraulic planning was revolutionary. The existence of such a structure reveals the ingenuity and foresight of the Indus people. They were not only architects and artisans but engineers of environment. To build a dockyard capable of withstanding tides required an understanding of currents, soil strength, and seasonal flooding. The dock's walls were reinforced with bitumen to prevent leakage, an innovation far ahead of its time. This was not the work of trial and error, it was design guided by knowledge. Around the dockyard rose the rest of the city, a meticulously organized settlement divided into sectors. The citadel, or upper town, stood on a raised platform, likely housing the elite and administrative centers. Below it lay the lower town, where craftsmen, traders, and families lived in orderly rows of brick houses. Each home had a courtyard, wells and drains connected to a covered sewage system, a hallmark of Indus urban planning. The streets intersected at right angles, forming a grid that gave both clarity and cleanliness to the living space. In workshops across Lothal, artisans produced objects that reveal both skill and sophistication. Beadmakers drilled carnelian with copper tools, achieving holes so fine they astonish even modern jewelers. Metalworkers shaped bronze tools and weapons. Potters fired painted ceramics with geometric motifs. Shell cutters carved intricate bangles and ornaments, while seal makers pressed designs into soft clay that still bear the marks of fingertips. The city hummed with craft and trade, a port alive with creation and exchange. Archaeologists also found evidence of advanced measurement systems, cubical weights made of chert stone, uniform across the Indus region, suggesting standardized trade and regulation. This uniformity, from distant cities to coastal ports, speaks to a civilization of shared systems and order. Lothal's merchants were part of something vast, a network that moved not only goods but ideas. Yet, beyond its brilliance, the city carries traces of fragility. The same water that made Lothal thrive eventually became its undoing. Geological studies suggest that the course of the Sabarmati River shifted, cutting the city off from the sea. Without access to water, trade declined. Over time, floods and silt buried the streets, the dockyard filled with debris, and the city was abandoned. What remains today is a ghost of precision, straight streets leading nowhere, brick platforms standing amid dust and silence. In the stillness of its ruins, one can imagine the life that once filled them. The sound of traders bargaining near the dock, the splash of water against ships, the rhythmic tapping of beadmakers in their workshops, the scent of baked clay, of fire and river mud. Every street, every drain, every brick once carried purpose. Lothal was not merely a settlement, it was a system, a living organism, built on coordination and trust. The mystery of the Indus script deepens Lothal's allure. Hundreds of seals found here bear inscriptions in an undeciphered language, a writing system of pictograms and symbols that no one has yet been able to read. Each seal represents a name, a place, or a transaction lost to time. They are the last whispers of voices that once guided ships and counted goods. In those small carvings lies the silence of an entire civilization, ordered, efficient, yet ultimately unknowable. What makes Lothal extraordinary is not just what it achieved, but what it represents. It shows that more than 4,000 years ago, humans had already learned to master water, geometry, and urban design, not for conquest, but for cooperation. The builders of Lothal were not emperors or warriors, they were engineers, merchants, and craftsmen. Their legacy is not carved in stone monuments, but in systems that worked, in cities that functioned, in lives that flowed like the rivers they built beside. When sunlight falls over the excavated dockyard, the shadows outline its shape, a long basin that once carried ships and dreams. The desert wind moves across its surface, and for a moment it feels as if the tide might return. The water may be gone, but the idea remains that even at the dawn of civilization, people sought connection beyond the horizon, believed in the movement of trade and tide, and built for both. The ancient city of Lothal endures as one of the world's earliest examples of maritime innovation, a city where the land met the sea, and humanity first learned to navigate both. It is a reminder that progress does not begin with empires or armies, but with the courage to build something that lasts, something that reaches outward. In the quiet geometry of its ruins, Lothal still holds that spirit. The pulse of water, the rhythm of design, and the voice of a civilization that understood that the world, like the tide, is always in motion. The basalt statue of Ebla, beneath the quiet plains of northern Syria, where fields now stretch over the ruins of ancient kingdoms, archaeologists uncovered a discovery that seemed to stare back through the ages: the basalt statue of Ebla, buried deep within the shattered remains of a Bronze Age palace. This life-sized figure, carved from dark volcanic stone, once stood as a goddess, her form commanding, her eyes unyielding. For nearly 4,000 years she lay hidden beneath layers of destruction, the ashes of her city covering her like a forgotten memory. When she emerged, she brought with her the story of one of the earliest centers of power and belief, Ebla, a city that rivaled the might of Sumer and Akkad, long before the rise of Babylon. The ruins of Ebla lie near modern-day Tel Mardik in northern Syria. Around 2500 BCE, it was one of the most important kingdoms of the ancient Near East, a place of trade, language, and art. At its height, Ebla's scribes recorded treaties and transactions on tens of thousands of clay tablets, written in cuneiform, some of the earliest archives in human history. Yet the city's temples and palaces spoke a different language, one of stone and silence. Among them stood the statue, now known as the Lady of Ebla, carved from a single block of basalt, heavy as history itself. When archaeologists uncovered her in the 1970s, they found her face down in the rubble of what was once a royal hall. The walls around her were blackened by fire, the same fire that destroyed Ebla nearly 4,200 years ago when invading armies brought its long reign to an end. But the statue had survived. Her features, though eroded by time, were unmistakably deliberate: a high crown, stylized hair, hands clasped at her chest, and eyes once inlaid with precious stone. The artistry of the Ebla statue is both ancient and astonishingly sophisticated. Carved from dense volcanic basalt, it would have required not only strength but mastery of tools. The lines are clean, the posture regal, and even in her damage, she commands presence. Her proportions reflect both idealization and symbolism. This was not meant to depict a mortal, but a goddess. Likely Ishtar, the Mesopotamian deity of love, war, and power. Ishtar, known as Inanna in Sumerian texts, was among the most complex and enduring figures of early mythology. She embodied creation and destruction, passion and sovereignty. The divine feminine, as both nurturer and warrior. In Ebla, she appears to have been a central figure of worship. Inscriptions from the city mention her name frequently, alongside offerings, hymns, and rituals performed in her honor. To carve her likeness in basalt, one of the hardest stones, was a declaration of permanence, a vow that her power would endure beyond the fall of kingdoms. The decision to bury or hide the statue remains uncertain. Some scholars believe it fell during the city's destruction, toppled from its pedestal as the palace burned. Others think it may have been deliberately buried, concealed by priests seeking to protect it from invaders. Whatever the case, its preservation in the ruins of the Palace G made it one of the most evocative discoveries in the ancient Near East. Around her, archaeologists found the charred remnants of a once glorious city, fragments of frescoes, ceremonial vessels, and thousands of cuneiform tablets, administrative records, diplomatic letters, and religious texts that together revealed an entire civilization previously unknown. The tablets described a vast kingdom with trade routes stretching from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean, exporting timber, silver, and wool, and importing metals and fine goods. They also contained references to early versions of names and places later found in the Bible, linking Ebla to the deep roots of Near Eastern history. The basalt statue of Ebla, however, spoke not in words but in presence. Her survival in the midst of ruin seemed almost symbolic, a goddess untouched by the fall of her worshippers. The stone itself adds to that impression. Basalt, born from volcanic fire, carries both strength and darkness. It was chosen not for ease, but for endurance. While softer stones like limestone eroded or crumbled, basalt endured centuries of burial. The artist who shaped her knew this. They intended her to last, to outlive the city she guarded. Her design reflects both local and foreign influences. The broad shoulders and upright stance recall Sumerian votive statues, while the smooth surfaces and abstract form hint at a distinct Eblite aesthetic. There is restraint in her posture, a stillness that seems almost meditative. The hands, clasped together, suggest offering or prayer. The crown, with its layered bands, indicates divinity. Yet despite the symbolism, there is something unmistakably human in her presence, an impression of watching, of waiting. To stand before her now, in the museum where she rests, is to meet a fragment of an age when gods and cities were inseparable. She represents both, the divinity who received devotion, and the civilization that built her image as a reflection of itself. In her silence, the boundaries between religion and art dissolve. What remains is devotion made tangible. The rediscovery of Ebla and its statue reshaped our understanding of the ancient Near East. Before the excavations, little was known of this northern Syrian power. But through the tablets and artifacts, archaeologists revealed a kingdom rich in culture, administration, and spiritual life. The Lady of Ebla became its emblem, a survivor from the Bronze Age's first dawn, her features gazing from the threshold between myth and archaeology. What makes the statue haunting is not only its age, but its endurance. The city that worshipped her fell to fire, its people scattered, its language forgotten. Yet the goddess remained, buried but unbroken, her basalt form untouched by millennia. In a sense, she fulfilled her purpose, to stand eternal, a guardian over memory. Some archaeologists have suggested that the statue's placement, deep within the ruins of a palace, signifies her dual role as protector and witness. In many ancient cultures, goddesses were seen as the heart of cities, embodiments of fertility, justice, and divine favor. When the city was destroyed, to protect her image was to preserve its soul. Whether by chance or intent, the Lady of Ebla was preserved, and with her, the story of a civilization once thought lost. The basalt statue of Ebla stands today as one of the oldest known life-sized representations of a deity from the ancient Near East. Her surface bears the wear of centuries, yet her outline remains clear, her message unchanged. She is not a relic of superstition, but a reminder of how early humans sought permanence, how they turned belief into form, and form into endurance. The quiet strength of the statue, the black sheen of her stone, the balance between simplicity and power, all speak of a people who understood that to carve in stone was to speak beyond mortality. Ebla may have burned, but through her basalt goddess, it was never truly silenced. In her calm expression there is both mourning and majesty, the echo of a civilization that saw divinity not in heaven, but standing among them, shaped from the same earth they walked upon. And though her temple has vanished, the goddess still stands, her presence a bridge between what was and what remains remembered.